Grandmother, Cordelia Hare, was born in Hornersville in 1891 and lived here for many years off and on. She was gone for about 40 years, and she came back to Hornersville and wrote a letter to her daughter who lives in Bonne Terre, Missouri, and said that Hornersville sure isn't the burg it used to be. Now, I don't know what my grandmother, who was 93 years old at the time, was looking for in Hornersville, but I guess I'd have to say that it certainly isn't the burg it used to be when I was growing up here either. But we're going to try to find out what kind of a burg Hornersville was. The settlers poured across the Mississippi River in the early 1800s, right after the earthquake. I was reading a book not long ago about the earthquake, and contrary to popular opinion, the New Madrid earthquake would probably have been better named the Hornersville earthquake, because the epicenter of that earthquake seems to be right here where we're sitting. Maybe we should call this whole thing off and get out of town. But the settlers swarmed across the river. There is evidence that there were settlers here in this area not long after 1800, and in Hornersville we know for fact that there were settlers here before 1832. The first white child born in Duncan County was born in Hornersville in 1832, somewhere near the town. Well, there was no town, but somewhere near this area. And also the first white man to die in Duncan County died just outside of Hornersville. It was a grandson and grandfather that was the first child born and the first man to die in this county. He also was the first person buried in the Hornersville Cemetery, or the Horner Cemetery, I think it's called. Obviously it wasn't called that then. The Horners came sometime between 1832 and 1840, and there was a number of people who came here with them, many of which are represented today by these people who we're going to have talking to us. In 1840, Martin Van Buren was President of the United States. There weren't going to have any baseball games on June 17th, 1840, because baseball hadn't been invented or put together, whatever you say. It was 24 years before Louis Pasteur would discover that bacteria caused disease, and the average lifespan of an American was 40 years. Now, I want to apologize to all of the Indians who were born in this area long before any white people came here. Undoubtedly, there were hundreds. When I taught school here, we read a story about DeSoto and his travels coming up the Mississippi. And in that story, DeSoto told about coming to a little town, an Indian town on a little river somewhere between the St. Francis and the Mississippi. One would like to think it might have been Hornersville. If that were true, then that would make Hornersville over 500 years old. And one of my students wrote a story about that, claiming that Hornersville was actually the descendant of that Indian village with a population of over 500 people in the year, what year was DeSoto? 1200, 1400, whatever, 1500. So we may be well celebrating the 500th anniversary of Hornersville rather than the 150th. But we're going to celebrate the 150th anniversary of white people in this country. Today we have 7 guests with us who are going to reminisce about their life in Hornersville, and I'd like to introduce those people to you now. On our left, we have Mr. Pat Burleson, who is a farmer and for many years was a school teacher in Hornersville. And were you born here?
Yes.
Okay. Second, Mr. Campbell Anderson, who for many years worked at the school here and was a farmer. Number 3, we have Dolly Wright Watson, who was a nurse for many years and is the oldest living graduate of Hornersville High School. No, that's not right. We decided that wasn't right.
Oh.
She's just the only graduate of the first class. There are probably a bunch of older people that graduated after her. Louise Perkins Branham, Pearl Smith Williams, Josephine Ruffin Langdon, and Lucille Branham Rogers. Now I'm going to go back and I'm going to start with Lucille. Lucille, would you tell us why your family came to Hornersville, if you know, and who a little bit of your background?
Well, both sides of my family were pioneers, and on my mother's side, my great-grandfather Michael Branham came here because of the hunting and fishing, and he traveled a whole lot. He didn't farm or raise cattle. He went to Bluefield, lived a while, and he got homesick for Little River. And the reason was, the family believes, is because he owned property in North Carolina that bordered on the Little River. And we like to think he helped name Little River. And the other side of my family came from France, down to Canada, down to this side. And they were French, and it was a romantic deal. It was not hunting or fishing or farming.
Okay, Mrs. Langdon?
My father came from Cincinnati, Ohio. He was reared by his grandmother and aunt, Joe Gonzalez, and her first husband was Mr. Aiken. He was a boot and shoe merchant in Cincinnati, and he sold shoes to the merchants down in this part of the country, and when they couldn't pay for their shoes, he took land in payment. And that's how come asked Joe Gonzalez to come to Hornersville after he passed away to see about this land. And my mother came from Indiana with Dr. Eli T. Anderson. And her mother was left a widow with about 7 children. And Dr. Anderson had no children. And so they sort of kept her as their child with them and brought her down here. And they stopped at Grandpa Langdon on their first stop down this far and stayed there until they got located in Hornersville. And when his first wife passed away, he took my mother back to Indiana to her people. And she stayed until he married my Aunt Joe Gonzalez, or Anderson. And so she came back down here. And my father and Harry Shepherd and George Quinn were all nephews of Aunt Joe Gonzalez. And my father was reared by Aunt Joe and her mother because his parents died, one at 2 and one at 4 years of age.
Okay. Were you born in Hornersville?
Yes, I was born in Hornersville, October the 8th, 19...
Something. Okay, Mrs. Williams.
Beg pardon?
Mrs. Williams.
I'm not a native of Hornersville, but I almost am. I was born in Walnut Ridge, Arkansas. My father worked for the East Arkansas Lumber Company, and they sent him here to take charge of this lumber company. And it was located right across the street from where we live now. And then we stayed here a year, and then they sent him to Rector, Arkansas. We stayed there a year, and then we moved back here. And by that time, I was about 4 years old. And been here on and off ever since then.
Okay, Mrs. Brandon.
Well, my dad was not a native of Hornersville. He came from up close to Zalma in Boulder County. And he was an orphan. His dad and mother both died when he was real young. And he was raised by relatives. But when he got old enough to work by the day, he came down here to look for work. This is good farming country. So he worked on a farm for Mr. Burl Robinson, first job he had. And my mother was Sally Mizell. She was one of 4 girls that my granddad, Martin Mizell, and Aunt Sissy Mizell had. And mother was the youngest. And she and my dad married in 1908. And I was born in 1909. And I had brother Lyndon and a younger brother Robert that was younger than we were.
Okay, Mrs. Watson.
Well, my father came from Tennessee and my mother from Kentucky. And they were married, and they came to Dexter, Missouri. And then they came to Hornersville. And he had a cousin here, which was Tom Wicker, Peck's father. So he went to work. Mr. Wicker had a liver stable, and my dad went to work at that liver stable. And the drummers would come in, they call them drummers, you know, to sell their wares. And you couldn't get out of Hornersville. If you got here, you couldn't get out. So they'd hire a buggy, horse and buggy, at the liver stable that my dad would drive to Kennett, and he got $5 for it. And then he went to work for Mr. Burleson. And Mr. Burleson and Mrs. Burleson went to St. Louis quite often. And my mother and dad would take care of the place. And they'd always bring me something nice from St. Louis. So one time they brought me a little stove, and Pat, you don't remember this, Pat brought it to me. It was cast iron and had little lids in it, and something to lift the lids with. And he worked for Mr. Burleson. And then he went to work for Mr. Gonsalvo. You know, straw boss, they call him, you know, picking cotton and chopping cotton and seeing over the farm at that time. And I was born here in Harlem.
Okay. C.B.?
Yeah, he was marshal here.
Marshal for
several years, And
Might have been a few stories told about that. Did he bring home stories about being the marshal?
well, we knew all about it. I had a hard time because he was always uptown.
You couldn't get away with it.
I had to come home early.
Okay, C.B.
Well, my parents, both of them were from Tennessee. My dad was from around Centerville, and my mother came here from Mullen. Her parents moved to Zenith. There was 5 of those boys that came in to Zenith, 5 of her. 4 were uncles and their dad. And their uncles, I don't know what kind of financial condition or anything that they were in when they were in Zenith. But there's 4 of them. My grandfather died when my mother and their 3 brothers were just very small. He died with the pneumonia and measles. And then my grandmother was a widow. She raised them till all those got going. What I started telling about the 4 other brothers, one of them was got into the mercantile business, the cotton business there. And well, he got real big in it. 1920 caught him. That's in that cotton market. And one of the other was, their name was Kinnear. And Zach Kinnear run a big drugstore there. And Abe Kinnear run the bank. And Uncle Joe Kinnear was a farmer and real estate. They had lots of land in this here around here. It sold in the 1930s, several. Bill Pat had one of the farms there at one time out here. Then my dad, getting back to him, he came out here in, I believe it was 99. And he came across the river on his calf and walked up here and landed up here around Cotton Plant and went to work for Uncle Charlie Langdon. Uncle Charlie boarded him. He lived there on the mound then. And I've heard Dad talk about on a Saturday his chores was to get up, get the team ready, and bring Uncle Charlie to town in pretty good shape. But when he come home, he'd have to have him in. And then Uncle Ed landed in Kennett, and he'd had a little schooling over there in Tennessee somewhere. That was kind of a bookkeeper, and he went to work for Shelton as a bookkeeper up there for several years. And Dad moved to Zenith and went to working for the near store company. And then they set him up out here at Caruth after, well, he married my mother there in about 91, I believe. They moved to Caruth and had run a furnishing store there for Kinnear Store Company. And then in 1908, Dad and Uncle Ed got together and moved to Hornersville and opened up a general merchandise store here in 1908. They run that store till 1930 and the panic come. And Uncle Ed couldn't face the consequences of it, and he killed himself. And then me and I was getting about 20 then, and Dad run that store till 1934, but we swore back, we never could pull it out. And then after 1904, my dad moved to the farm, and him and Mother stayed there till 90. I believe it was about 38 or 39, and the house they lived in, it's over there with me now, was pulled in. They jacked her up. Just moved him on back to town.
So
and then they lived there in that house then until they died. And he built that house where I'm in now, and I've lived in that house a little over 60 odd years.
Is that right?
And the house that I was born in was down there on the corner. It belonged to Dr. Sullivan at that time, and it's where Ron Bibbs lives now. They rebuilt the house, but that's where I was born in 1910.
Mr. Burleson?
My father came here from Tennessee too. And I might tell a little something about him right now, then I'll go ahead. Anyway, when he came over here, the next day he came to town and he met a man from Tennessee, and he asked my father where he come from. He said, I come from Tennessee. He said, what run you off from over there? Anyway, he heard about this area here while he was working in timber down around Mark Tree. He worked on Little River quite a bit, around Leaf-Hando and on down around Mark Tree back when they used to raft timber. They would cut it, and then when the river had come up, why, they'd put it together and then float it down to the river to Mark Tree. So anyway, that's when before he married his first wife. He went back home over to Tennessee then and married and tried to farm over there, but that's before they had fertilized, and they kind of thought the land was wore out. So he said, well, I'll tell you, I'm going to try to go over there in Missouri to an area that I heard a lot about when I was logging. So he had a team, a horse and a mule, and a wagon, and a few household goods, 3 children. He didn't have any money at the time, but he owned a cow, and he sold the cow to his brother for $20. And they came over here, across the river, somewhere near Crothersville, and came on over and by the way of Kennett. And he stayed all night somewhere over around Crothersville or between Crothersville and Kennett. Next day, while he was coming on to Hornersville, and he got down to just a little bit south of where I live now. And he saw an empty house there. And he told his wife, why, you know, if I knew who to see, they might let us stay all night in this house. Well, he had passed the house just a little north of that, up about the Hutchins place. So he decided to drive back up there and see if he could find out who the house belonged to. And Oscar Dempsey was the man that lived there. And he told him his name and says, I've come upon a house down here that's empty. And it says, who does that belong to? But he said, that belongs to Bert Langdon. Well, he says, I wonder where could I see him? Oh, he said, you can't see him now. He says, he runs a bank down there, but he says, he's probably going home or somewhere but now. He says, what do you want? He said, well, I want to spend the night there. He said, just go ahead and stay there. He says, if anything comes up about it the next day, you just tell him that I told him to stay there. He said, it'll be all right, you won't even worry. So he did. Went back and spent the night there. The next morning, he got up and went to town and found Mr. Langdon. And he found him in the bank, and he told him, says, I've come to see you and tell you that I spent the night at your house right above town here. Oh, well, yeah, he said, I have an empty house there. And he said, well, that's just fine, you're welcome. He said, well, could I pay you? He said, no, you don't need to pay me anything. And they got to talking, and he says, where you just got in this country? He said, yeah, I just got in yesterday afternoon. Well, he said, what do you plan to do here? Oh, he said, just work at anything. I'll work in the timber, or on the farm, or just do anything. And Mr. Langdon was called Bert. They called him Uncle Bert. He said, well, I'll tell you, I need a hand. He says, if you don't mind, he said, I buy livestock. And he says, I need a man to go with me when I buy something, the man to get back into town. And he says, now I'll pay you $6 a week. And my dad said, boy, that just tickled me to death, $6 a week. For him, there's 3 children. And, he worked till past Thanksgiving. And he came down from the bank one morning. That's where he met Mr. Langdon each day. And Uncle Bert said, well, Dad, he says, I'm going to quit buying livestock. And, he says, I hate to hear that. Said, my wife and I were just talking. We had it made this winter. We're going to get $6 a week, and we could live on that through the winter. Oh, well, he said, that's all right. He said, I'm going to let you make some money now. Of course, my dad couldn't read. He, of course, couldn't figure. And he said, well, I don't know how you're going to let me make money. He said, well, I'm going to let you buy the stock and ship it like I've been doing. But he said, I don't know anything about that now. Well, he says, you know what I've been paying for a cow. I give anywhere $5 to $12 for a cow, $1 to $2 for a hog. And he says, when I get a carload, well, I ship them up to St. Louis. But he said, I wouldn't know who to ship them to. Well, he said, I do, and I'll straighten you. He said, well, I don't have any money to buy any stock with. Well, he says, I'm going to loan you that money. Without a note, he loaned him $150. And my father told me that he bought 4 carloads of stock for $150. Shipped it to St. Louis, and he doubled his money. And so he said, I just got to be on my way. And he said, to tell you that Bert Langdon was the finest man that I ever knew. He asked me in the spring, said, what are you planning on doing now? Farm? He said, yeah, if I can find some land. Oh, he said, I'll find you a piece of ground. I said, how many acres you want? Oh, he said, it's about 40 or not over 80. But they were used to doing their own work. So he found him, I believe it was native. And he started farming. And so about every time he'd go to town, he'd go down and see Bert. They'd have a talk. Bert told him, he said, now Ed, if you're going to farm, you need to buy you some land. Well, he said, I'd be glad to buy some if I knew where something was for sale or had the money to buy it. He said, I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll just keep my eyes open. When I find a piece of ground for sale, we'll buy it. And that's how he got started. And he just thought he was a wonderful man. I'd like to tell you something else, too, about another man that was back then. back then, the two leading men in Hornersville, now my dad came over in 98. He told me it was Dr. Kinsolvin and Bert Langdon. And that was before Dr. Kinsolvin married Dr. Anderson's wife. He says he was another fine man. He said he didn't turn down anybody to go see if they come in, wanted him to go out to their home and treat them. But he says he'd go any day, including Sunday. But he'd always tell them, now one thing, I've got to get back to town by 11 o'clock. He played the organ at the Methodist church, Dr. Kinsolvin did. And he said that was two of those fine men as he ever did.
Well, there've been lots of interesting people in Hornersville. Maybe I'll start talking about some of those. All of you have. I guess everybody has a memory of Major Ray.
Yeah.
Well, Dolly,
I had some experience with Major Ray. 1918, when the war was over, they had a big party uptown, and then it was a celebration. And they hung old Kaiser right out where the old flagpole used to be. And me and Major Ray was chosen to shoot the Kaiser down. We both had 410 shotguns. And
were you about the same height?
yeah, close to it. I was 8-year-old, but I was a little, I guess maybe I was a little taller than Major at that time. But when it come time to knock old Kaiser off of the tight wire up there, me and Major pulled down on him and dropped him.
Dolly, you remember?
I was there that day, and it was Lucille's birthday. And last year on her birthday, I said, Lucille, do you remember what happened however many years ago the war ended? And she had forgotten it, and I'm glad to hear C.D. tell it, because I remember that they let out school that afternoon, but they didn't just turn us loose. We had to march uptown from the school, and when we got up there, the whole town was up there celebrating, and they had hanged the Kaiser and everything. And I remember that Major got to shoot at him. I forgot C.D., but I was 9 and C.D. was 8.
You were telling something a while ago, Dolly, about a party.
When we graduated, it was first class to graduate from Hornersville High School. And we had everything just like everybody else. Every big school, you know, it was the best school in this area. So we went on a trip, and Major Ray had a boat. And it had a top on it, and had windows and seats and a deck. And when I got on that boat, in the meantime, I've seen Queen Elizabeth and Queen Mary docked in New York City. But that boat looked just like that then. That was the biggest thing I ever seen in my life. And down the little river we went. And Cora and me was afraid to get out on the deck, but the boys got out on the deck, you know, to get the sun. And then girls, you know, would let the sun shine.
They were smart, weren't they?
And Miss Jenny Ray, Major's wife, was my Sunday school teacher. There was about 12 or 14 of us. And it would come promotion day and we wouldn't leave. And it took them about 3 years to get that group out of Miss Jenny's class.
They all wanted to mention.
We wanted to stay with Miss Jenny. And I remember when Ty, the dog, died. You know, Miss Cora. Oh, we just cried. We'd go to the fence. He was buried just inside the yard there. And we'd just cry and cry because Ty died. He was an agent, you know, for Buster Brown Shoe Company. And we had Captain Shields. He was the big man, you know. Y'all remember him?
Yeah.
He traveled with the circus.
He traveled with the circus.
He must have been quieter than the Major, or he wasn't as interesting or something. You don't hear as much about Captain Shields as you do.
He could have been. He was real heavy, great big.
Now, according to the records, his wife was taller than he was. Do any of you remember her?
She was shorter than he was.
Jenny was short, now he married later.
He married
another week.
No, I'm talking about Captain Shields.
Oh,
Captain Shields' wife. I understand was taller than he was, nearly 7 foot tall.
Well, wasn't she,
I've never had seen it. Right.
Alfred Parsons,
I live next to
Mother.
Baptist church there.
wasn't,
She was the second one.
Yeah,
Second one.
yeah.
kept Shield.
He had a son named Shade. Shade Shields.
Shade, Paul.
Well, Major
Jerry,
Lee's house.
Major had a peculiar handshake. I don't know what then you ladies remembered there or nothing like that.
That's where I learned that.
Yeah.
Now that's an interesting piece of trivia. Yeah. Well, I suppose everybody, you couldn't keep your eyes off of him.
Oh, no.
I was in his Sunday school class, and Pearl was too, Lucille.
And I won a wristwatch one time for being there every Sunday. I thought he did.
He gave us each a New Testament, and I kept mine a long time. You were still in high school when we had it, but we lost it.
Major was a good churchgoer, and the best I could remember, I was coming to Methodist in, but I'd go over to Baptist side, but there on that front pew around, Major had him a little bitty chair that he sat down in, and he had a customer that was sat down by it. Is that right, Dan?
Right.
In the church.
Yeah, he chewed tobacco during the services.
They lived, their house was right where the Baptist parsonage is. That was their 2-story house.
Sure was a big house at that time.
Oh,
And they had one room furnished in small furniture to fit their size.
Sunday school parties.
And we had someone that at that time was thinking front up ahead. That could have been a shrine because he was well known all over the whole United States and had his own furniture, and it's just unfortunate that we just didn't have any forethought, you know, to have it restored, and we would have a lot of tourists, I imagine, here too.
I can still remember the house when I was young.
Did it burn, Jerry?
I don't think so.
We lived in, my family lived in it. Right after his wife died, he had all of her stuff stored out there. But
Miss Jenny died, he said,
I guess it was finally torn down, is what finally happened to it. Was it sometime before you built that parsonage over there?
Yeah, that's right, what we're walking on, what we're built for.
I was asking some of you the other day, and nobody seems to know, and probably maybe nobody knows, who the first person was to raise cotton in this country. We figured that Cotton Plant was a good-sized town before 1860 and was called Cotton Plant, so obviously somebody was raising cotton here before that, or they wouldn't have named that town that.
I've been told that's where the first gin was.
Yeah. And Mr. Langdon built gin there, if I'm not mistaken.
Grandfather Langdon. E.J.
Tell them what you were telling us today about that Grand Prairie, how that looked.
Well, there was no timber on that section of land around in there. And when Grandpa Langdon died, Dad Langdon was made administrator of the estate, and he took 400 acres of the cotton plant for his share, when some of the others got 5,000 acres of wild land, you know. But Dad wanted something that was making money right then, so.
Didn't want to wait for it. And you were telling us why he never would sell any property in cotton plant.
Grandfather Langdon would not sell a lot, and because he didn't want whiskey brought in there. He said he never would have it because he liked it too well. He never would have it around.
But I don't think you could say that about Hornersville, though, could you?
No.
There was a little whiskey in Hornersville, was there?
Yes, and it was on Lucille knows, down Front Street there, way down. That old Horner house was where we lived. When I was 6 years old, we moved there. And it belonged, I don't know, I guess that Joe Consoling Anderson owned all that riverfront there. And so we lived in that house until I was married there. And Dorothy was born there in that old corner house. And I have a picture to break down to the celebration of the maid in in later years. We never did have a good picture of the front of it. But we had the upstairs porch. You could see way down to Swiftwater, you know, down the river. It was beautiful.
Did the house face the river?
Yes. And in the spring, the water would come up to our front gates. But it was on a sort of a mound. And it never got in the yard.
It was up behind where Cag Stone built that house.
Yeah.
His Cag's faces north, but that's the old Harmon house, they call it.
The oldest house in town, in Hornersville.
When do you know when the main street, which is not the main street, when the businesses and everything moved off that street and moved up to Mountain Street, where Main Street is now?
Yeah.
I can remember when they had board sidewalks. Wood, you know.
You remember when they moved up that way?
I don't know what
Before
year,
our time.
That was before your time.
but I know Dad Langdon, when T.B. Gonzalez had a post office down on that front street, and Dad Langdon was trying to move the town up where it is now, and he offered T.B. a lot to build a building to move the post office up town. And I guess he had built the Hornersville Mercantile, that brick building where your father was in business.
Yeah.
That was the first brick building in Hornersville.
Your daddy.
Dad Langdon built that, and
Yeah, that's right.
it was called the Hornersville Mercantile Company at that time. And then
Now, Dolly, if you got good stories, don't
and then
hide.
he had the bank. Then he had the bank, you know.
The town started moving up there right after the railroad came through.
Oh, yeah.
About 1900, I believe. I'm not sure that was the year, but anyway.
When was that railroad, Leonard? You've been a dealing south of the land. When was that?
I think around 1904.
1904.
1904. But
Now this-
anyway,
Leonard bought there where the depot is. That was abstract there.
my father told me that they wanted him to move the drugstore up there. They wanted the town to start building on there. Mr. T.B. said, no, that cost me too much money. He is a very conservative fellow and a mighty fine man. He was also the barber. He was a barber, the postmaster, and the druggist. He had a drugstore and a general store all there in one building. And the farmers told him that they would move him free of charge if he would build a building up there. So they did, and the farmers took their wagons and moved all of his stuff up to there on that street.
Dad Langdon laid out the streets, the 80-foot streets.
Well, Leonard's granddad got a start up there in the restaurant business, and Wood Mill is right close to the end of the Mound Street now, about there where Bartlett Bibbs is,
Yeah.
or where that old filling station is. He run up there for
Had
years.
a restaurant there.
Yeah.
And Miss Ruby was cashier.
Yeah.
Well, what else? Some of the other businesses along Main Street when you were young people? What?
Well, this lumberyard that my dad was manager of was quite a place. They had, at the back of the lumberyard was this huge barrel of tar. And every morning, kids would go by there and get a little hunk of that tar and go to school chewing it. And then when Halloween would come, he'd have to sit up all night and watch it because the boys would go carry off the lumber and just distribute it all over town. And they'd find him at one part of the lumber yard. See, part of the lumber was on the outside. And they'd catch him at one end, then they'd go to the other end and start carrying the lumber off. Then he'd hear them down there. Then he'd go down there, then they'd go back where he was. And take him all the next day to get all the lumber brought back and put in place.
That's what they do my dad when he was marshal. They even one end of town.
Yeah. Well, they didn't run out of that idea, I don't think. I think they might still be trying that somewhere. I was reading in the Dunklin Democrat, an old Dunklin Democrat, once about a robbery here. They robbed the post office. They blew it up. And Mr. Walter Perry was the only one that had a gun. that would go into town. Everybody else ran away, they said, the paper said. They were all afraid to go. Nobody had a gun, and they were afraid they were that they were going to shoot at them. And Mr. Perry was the only one with a gun that went in.
They didn't happen when my father was postmaster. First off, I heard.
It was in 1900, or right after 1900.
My father was postmaster 13 years.
I thought it was an interesting story. I'd never heard it
I grew
before.
up at the post office and the old Joseph store.
Well, see, you told me a story yesterday about a Jesse James story that I thought was interesting.
I didn't know whether you wanted to go back that far.
Oh yeah, let's go back. Let's go back as far as we can.
Well,
or as far as anybody can.
Uncle, when we were in the post office, Uncle Pete Bradley would come in and talk to us a lot. He wasn't my uncle, but everyone called him Uncle Pete. And he said, Lucille, I'm going to tell you something interesting that happened here years ago. He said there was a saloon down on the riverbank, as we were talking a while ago, it's 1st Street, Main Street. And a big Irishman ran the saloon. And 2 fellas dropped in there, big, swaggering looking fellas. And the bartender said, is there something I can do for you? Do you want something to drink? And they said, well, no, I guess not. Said, we heard about this place and how tough the people were down here. We came down to find out. And so that was all the Irishman wanted to know, and he lit into them. And however, the 2 men who supposedly were the James brothers was about to get the best of him when a little 12-year-old boy over in the corner spied a cotton weight, and he picked it up and slipped it to the Irishman, and that was the end of the fight for the James boys. And they went away. They said, well, we found out.
Hornersville's too tough for the James brothers.
And I have a sneaking idea that little 12-year-old boy was Uncle Pete. I really do. Because he would have been about that age.
Yeah.
They robbed the train at Ironton, you know, Dad's Hill. The train had to slow down, you know, going over the hill, and they had to have the second engine go up there and meet them and pull them over this hill, which wasn't too high, according to the Rocky Footballs.
Back when I was a young boy, there wasn't no stock law. We had goats that run loose in the town herds of them.
Pigs.
Pigs had hog waters in the main street.
Yeah. And they came down and go across the river every day, the cattle and the pigs. A lot of them would come down and go across the river in the summer and come back in the afternoon. They'd go over there and graze.
On the other side.
Yeah.
The river was
It got shallow in the summer. They just had the main stream. It didn't flow out all over sometimes.
My grandmother Mabry told me a story about those pigs that she was walking in front of the Hornersville Hotel, it was called, on the east side of Main Street.
Where Gibb is.
Yeah. And on a wooden sidewalk.
Yeah.
And she was going to go visit her aunt, and she couldn't get by those pigs at the end, so she decided to jump them. And she ran back and ran and jumped, and one of those big old pigs jumped up just as she got there, and she straddled it, and she ran off down Main Street on the back of the pig. And she said there were several days she wouldn't go to town. She just wanted everybody to know that it was her.
We had a law back then that no colored people were allowed in Hornersville after dark. And then when these traveling soldiers wanted to come in, if they had colored people with them, they couldn't stay in Hornersville.
They couldn't stay. Now, I always have heard that. Do you suppose that was really a law?
I think it was an unwritten law.
An unwritten law?
I'll say it was.
Yeah.
We know there were black people in Hornersville. Before the Civil War, there were numerous slaves in town. You can see, according to the 1850 census, numerous people in Hornersville owned slaves. So I wondered, since most of those people stayed in towns, why all the black people left Hornersville?
When we were in about the 5th grade, we went up to town and found that law, and it was a written law on the city books. That black people could stay
Was somebody killed? Was a black man killed here at one time?
Well, raise that. We did find that already.
Slave owner here.
Well, as far as I know, since the Civil War, there have never been any black people living in
Any of
Hornersville,
these farmers.
in the town of Hornersville.
The
Is
old
that right?
timers that were on
As far as I know, that's true.
Did you?
Of course, there have been numerous black students in school here, but, well, another question. Do you remember anybody ever telling you anything about Indians in this country? Now, we know there were, and we know that people came here and traded with the Indians. But do you remember anybody ever telling you that they had personal contact
I've
with
heard
Indians?
about an old Indian that lived out east of Kennett that people, my dad and mother's age remembered.
Was that the one called Chillicothe that lived, had all the cats?
All,
Yeah.
did you say cats?
Cats. He was famous for having hundreds of cats.
Yeah. I think that's written in the history of Duncan County.
Yeah, it is. But around Hornersville, there's numerous mention of it in history. But I don't know anyone who ever knew anything about it or knew anything about the mounds that... Now, somebody told me that there used to be 11 mounds between Cotton Plant and Hornersville.
I expect there was.
Mr. Sitter showed Bob where they were, and his father had showed him. I couldn't tell you, but
Remember
they
when
could.
that mound that got a fire? You know, people came from everywhere, you know, when one was burning underneath that mound.
Oh, really?
It was like peat, it was rotted material that had dried and got so dry and it caught on fire, and everybody stopped to see it. Everett and I talked about that not too long before he died.
It burned days and days and
It
weeks.
was smoked out there all the time.
Under the big mound where the house is? Is that right?
It was down
It was on the... it was
kind of
below.
the swamp part of it.
I'd say it's the back of where the mound is, Pat, don't you think? Toward the river from the mound.
Yeah, I went up there and saw it.
Oh, they came from everywhere. It was in all the papers and everything.
Well, the first school in town, when we went to school, we walked out the railroad
Tell
to
me
the
about
school out where Barbara's beauty shop is. That was the school.
Had to walk the railroad.
Yes.
We got there the best way we could. And when we came home, we had to march.
And
First 2
trains
years.
were going then, you know, both
Both ways.
passenger and freight trains. And,
Why do you suppose they put the school so far out of the town?
well, we had to have the country children walk to
To
school
come to,
too.
so they kind of centered it.
I guess that's where the people lived.
And we walked from Front Street all the way out the railroad track. Sometimes we walked the dirt road hoping a farmer would be going that way and we'd get a ride.
and you know somebody had to give the land for the school.
This
Most people
school,
were selling land.
Well, that was called the Branham School, was it not?
yeah.
No, that one wasn't.
Oh, it wasn't?
Brown School was up close to where Venus house, Vina and Sock's house is.
Well, that's
Don't
used
you
to
know?
be. Yeah,
Huh?
that's used to be. I thought it was another one.
No, I thought you all were talking about out where Barbara is.
Yeah, that's where we were.
That's where.
Brown
And they
School was
built
north
this
of that.
first school in town in 1914, the year we got married.
Well, the brick school was built the year I was 6 years old. There were four rooms downstairs and 4 rooms upstairs. And we just went to the 8th grade. And the year that the school was new, we started in the 1st grade. And then 8 years after that, when we got ready for high school, they built an addition onto the west side of it that had an auditorium and a stage and a laboratory and library. And we were freshmen that year. And that
Who were some of the teachers that you...
W.R. Sewell was principal. And Lewis R. Curry was,
W.R. was superintendent.
Lucille
and
was
then,
there.
Mr. Curry was principal.
Blanche Langdon was music
Mrs.
teacher.
Bockham and Mrs. Montgomery. That was the 4 teachers we had.
Were there any special celebrations, you being the first class to graduate?
Sure there was. We had everything. We had that trip I was telling you about on that boat, you know. And we had baccalaureate sermon and had commencement. And Mr. Sewell got somebody out of Cape Girardeau to deliver the commencement. We thought we was something else. And
Did you wear caps and gowns?
no, I'll tell you about her clothes. My mother sewed and Cora's mother sewed. And my mother made my dress and Miss Bryant made Cora's. But Cora had a cousin in Paragould that sent her dress already made in a pair of white shoes. We had to have white shoes with her white dress. And you couldn't get a pair of white shoes in Hornersville, no way. And you couldn't get out of town. So his dad told my dad, said, we're going to order Dolly a pair of white shoes from St. Louis. Said, bring her up here and let me measure her foot. So they took me up there and measured my foot. And Mr. Anderson said, I was up there the next day to see if they come in. And he said, Dolly, they won't be here for about 2 weeks. And when they came in, he said, Dolly's shoes are here, told my dad. And he said, well, I'll take them down to the house. He said, no, let her come up here. Said she's come up here every day since the day they was ordered after them white shoes. I've had a lot of shoes, but those white shoes was the greatest things that I ever had. And that trip on that boat, I really thought I was, you know.
Was that Lady Ray's boat?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
Jerry, I believe that the class of 1926 was the first to have caps and gowns with the dress.
I think one graduation that our class will never forget was the night that we graduated from the 8th grade. We had the commencement right here. And at that time you had carbide lights or something, and they kept going off and on. And I think we were all known for our giggling anyhow, and we started giggling, and we think everything was calm. We reckon somebody snort out again, and then we'd all start laughing. And I looked back, I knew my dad and mother was just so embarrassed, and I knew I was going to catch it when I got home, but I couldn't help it when we laughed. And then when the president of the school board got up to present our diplomas, he'd had a little nip or two, and he got all of our names mixed up.
That must have been
FC.
And when he went to call Mildred Ford's name, he called her Rose Ford.
Irene Rose.
Irene Rose, and then of course then I just started. Well, it didn't take a whole lot to get us started anyhow, but that'll be a night I don't think that we'll ever forget.
Well, it's good to know you all have matured and don't giggle anymore.
Oh no, never.
Never, never.
Well, I had to stay in a lot at school for talking.
Oh,
Very unusual.
what was discipline in school like in those days? Were there...
Stay in recess.
We were just talking today, Jerry, I believe it was a relative of yours, was Paul Young's sister named Ruth Young.
Lucille.
Well, I think our 3rd grade teacher was Ruth Young. When I got a whipping with the switch, I had to stay after school.
No, those Youngs were...
Miss
there was-
Lucilia.
Yeah, there were Youngs here. They were no relations of ours, and we don't know that if they were related to us.
He
we don't
was
know.
a doctor.
Yes, there's
And
a
they
doctor.
lived
here.
out there where the Hares lived later, the Young family. And there was a Paul Young that was an invalid. He was on crutches, a big, heavy fellow.
Yeah, as far as we know, those people were not related to us.
Well, I don't know where they came from here.
My family came here, my Young family came here in 1900 for water because there was a drought, a severe drought up in the hills where they lived around Bloomfield, and they left there because of water. They got tired, they said, of drinking the water in the morning and washing dishes in it that night, and then they'd wash their feet in it before they went to bed. The next morning they'd take it out to the chickens and said that got to be too much trouble. So they came here so they could waste all the water they wanted to waste. Because I guess that was one thing Hornersville was famous for water.
We had plenty of
And mosquitoes.
Yeah, really.
Sure.
and bullfrogs. You could hear the frogs at night. We lived down on that front street, and you went to sleep at night hearing the bullfrogs bellered in the night.
Yeah. You were telling Burcham's on the tape that we saw of yours about the guy killing all the frogs and
Dick Hillhouse.
and how many frogs was it he was
400 he had an order for. He had to stop and cut them half in two and throw the backs away. They didn't eat those, they just saved the legs to get
them all in the boat.
them all in the boat. And there was nothing better than frogs for breakfast with hot homemade biscuits and gravy. My dad used to go and bring a gunny sack full of them. Yeah. Gunny sack full.
Oh, boy.
I was telling somebody yesterday, my grandmother Young said when she first came here, she could hear panthers screaming over in the woods. Well, I could just visualize this black animal. Well, I years found out later that cougars in this country were called panthers. Do any of you ever remember hearing them? Of course, this was most of this is before you all were born, or at least when you were very, very young.
No, I've heard of panthers in the East Woods. After I was pretty good size. And you heard that they were what?
Oh, my grandmother Young said she could hear them screaming off out in the woods back of their house. Now, they lived in Cotton Plain then.
But you thought there was something besides.
Well, I just thought they were the black animals that I thought were panthers. I didn't know that in this country they called a panther a cougar. What most people in this country call a cougar, here it was called a panther.
We call it a car now.
Called what?
A car.
A car? Yeah.
Ford makes a cougar.
Yeah.
A Ford makes a cougar.
Well, my dad Langdon said they used to have bears that would come up out of the woods, you know, and eat their hogs.
I remember one night someone killed a bear, and they brought it in, and I think everyone in Hornersville had to go up to town to see the bear. And from then on, I was just scared to death after it got dark. I didn't know when was going to have the next bear around.
That is Mr. Pete Cotton.
It was.
Big
common.
Yeah, I know there's a tail behind that.
Yeah, there's a tail behind that.
Mr. Tail like that.
Well, the bear was caught in a trap, he just took it out of the trap.
Oh.
Oh, city college.
Mr. One
Caught the bear.
Brown and caught it.
And had to cross the bear in trouble.
Yeah.
Well, I expect there's been some bad trouble in Hornersville at one time or another. Is there anything you can tell about that without hurting somebody's feelings? Because I guess everybody here is related to somebody around here. Yeah, you have to be careful.
Well, they said it was pretty tough. In those days, there were 2 or 3 saloons, I think. And I guess it was pretty rough in
Yeah, my dad
early days.
said when you came to town here, they tried you out. The first time that he came to see Mr. Bert Langdon that morning, he didn't stop at the saloon. But the first time he went in the saloon, why, he sat down and ordered something to drink. And they brought it to him, and there's 2 men down the way there, and one of them come up and sit down beside him. And he had a drink in his hand too. He said, "Where are you from?" He said, "Well, I'm coming over here from Tennessee." He said, "We don't like Tennesseans." So that his drank in my dad's face, and they had a fight right there. He said,
On the first day.
"Yeah, first time he went in the saloon."
Now, according to the census in 1850, 95% of the people in Hornersville came from Tennessee. So it must have been one of those other 5% that didn't like the people from Tennessee, because I think they'd all had to like each other. Do you know how long we've been?
Yes, a lot of them come over here and get away from the law. So.
Yeah.
My dad was about the only Republican, I think.
Oh, Jerry,
Yes.
I'd kind of like to pay a tribute to the women, the early women in town. I heard my mother admire John Leonard's grandmother and Miss Bertha Sullivan and Mom Ruffin and maybe 1 or 2 others I can't name right now. But they stepped in sometime. Nearly every man in town drank, and when it get too much, those women would not let their business down. Some of them didn't have down. The ones I named are not all included in that, but they would step in and take care of the business. If it hadn't been for them, they would have lost their business. I guess John Leonard knows that. He's shaking his head.
Well, my Uncle Earl used to tell me about the Bullpen Saloon uptown in Hornersville. Do any of you remember that? He said when he was a little boy, they'd come to town and he'd look through the knotholes at the saloon, they had a fence around the back of the building. It's the house that my mother lives in now.
That's where our post office was.
Yeah. They had board fence that was slick on the inside so they couldn't climb over it, and no steps up the back. And when they had too much to drink, they'd push them out the back door into the bullpen, and they'd just wallow around in mud or whatever. And when they got sober enough, they could knock on the door, and they'd let a ladder down and let them back through. And the only way to get out was to go back through the saloon to get back out. So some of them never made it much past the bullpen and back in the saloon, I guess.
Jerry, I think one of the social events of our town several years ago was going to town and sitting on the benches out in front of those doors on Saturday night. Everybody went to town, and they had benches up and down the street, and sit down, the kids would get out and play, and the mothers exchange the latest news. And I don't know what the fathers were doing, but anyhow, that was a big night.
Well, the stores stayed open till 12 o'clock at night, until after the picture show. We finally got a picture show in town, and the farmers stayed open till people got out of the show to pick up their groceries.
And that was the night that I got my weekly allowance of a nickel, and I could spend it for anything I wanted. That was our allowance. We had a nickel every Saturday night.
Now that went way back too, that idea of going to town on Saturday night.
We had traveling shows.
Yeah.
I can remember when we had one church, and everybody went to this one church. And I can remember, and it was down there, about where, what is back of Lucille's house, in that plot of ground, just north and west there. Later, Mr. Pope had a ice house there, but the old church was there, and when we were dating, we used to skate there, and then we had dances there, and for the dances in the wintertime.
Jack, it was a church that made a skating rink out of it.
Skating rink, and when traveling shows come to town, we rented it to them, or they showed there.
Well, was it still the church then?
No.
It was after
the churches.
After the church.
The Baptists pulled off first and built theirs, and then we built ours.
You don't know where the first basketball court was?
Yeah, now that's an interesting thing. Tell about it.
It's over by Father's Fishville at the grocery store.
And I understand it had posts right up through the middle of it, didn't it?
Yes. And I remember when I was a freshman, Hornersville brought the girls' team over here, and they had to stay all night, and we beat the socks off of them. And the two girls that stayed in our home, we lived over there with Fred and Kitty, they stood up, leaned against the wall and cried half the night because they got beat. They were in this little town. But they were at a disadvantage because of the court.
Well, did they just have a girls' game? Now that's early for girls' sports. Was there a boys' game too? Or?
Yes, there was a boys' game too. I don't remember how the boys' game came out.
We played ball too, 21.
You did too?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well now, what do you suppose caused that then there was a period there in the 1950s when they decided it wasn't good for girls to play basketball. You remember? And they stopped girls basketball. What do you suppose got into people to think that?
Still stopped out here.
There's still no girls basketball in Hornersville?
We played, we was tough, we played Santa.
They were our rivals.
Well, why was it you could play basketball, do you suppose, and this girls today can't?
I don't know, but we had a team, we played Santa and cotton clad and cardboard. And it was a grand time when we played Santa. We had a lot of fun.
See, the girls started playing basketball here at the same time the boys did. And then they got to thinking it was too strenuous on girls, and they quit playing.
Well, Dorothy played in grade school, and she's 17.
I ran free.
Yeah,
I can't remember when I did play.
There was
now, basketball, wonder who was brought it here? Do you have any idea?
Mr. Sull.
Was it when you were in high school?
Yes. That's when I was in the 7th grade.
7th grade.
You were a coach a long time, weren't you?
Yeah.
Were you a player too?
I played 4 years in high school. Weighed 140 pounds.
Carly played 4 years, and then Charles came on, he play 4 years. We run around 8 years, followed every ball
You
game.
know,
there was.
Maryland was probably too least being played by the time.
And what about baseball? You
Well,
remember?
baseball, they played it before,
Well, we had football here at one time.
1 year.
Just 1 year?
but they played baseball. All had football more than 1 year.
I think so.
Yeah,
I thought it was
football
just
was
one
several years.
Jim Langdon was
Yeah.
the,
Who coached football?
Jim Langdon.
Jim Langdon and Sal Branham.
Yeah.
Sal was coach, I know 1 year. And they quit the year that I started. They,
I think I started in 27.
Yeah, I
I believe
graduated
it.
in
they just
26.
had 3 years.
I graduated in 26.
With a football game.
We were having football when I was in high school.
We quit playing football and we had to start dividing the term.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, the cotton. Now, originally, when you went to high school, did you start school in September, followed a regular term,
I believe this.
and then later we separated for the cotton?
Cotton picking vacation.
When did that cotton picking vacation start, do you suppose?
It started in
Last of August.
Started in 30?
Started the first year, Pat coaching there the second year.
And it went on then to,
November.
well, yeah, but I mean, went on, still had a cotton vacation almost up to the time the school closed.
Well, they need
Well,
the children to help gather the crop, you see.
Yeah, I guess all the time, all the
That's
years.
one of the things that caused several votes to vote to go to Senate. They still had divided term. We closed for state term.
Okay, I remember one of the years that I taught here, I don't remember the other one, when we did have a divided term. But maybe the second one we went to the
When
regular.
our children were little,
Regular
it was
term.
divided term.
Jerry, back in the 1920s, when we had track meet at Kennett, we also had literary meet. And we who participated in that, we'd go to Kennett and we were guests in Kennett people's homes for 2 nights while we had the literary meet. Music and
Slider ones.
They had scholarship too. Scholarship, literary and track field.
Well, a lot of them singing there.
Well, Louise participated in the piano contest. We were
always
proud
had
of her.
Miss Shula always had somebody in all the, Miss Shula Ruffin always had somebody that was in all the music.
It always seemed like Hornersville was a very cultured town for being in the bottom of something, away from everything else. It always seemed to furnish
And now we
culture for
don't have a music teacher in town.
nobody.
Nobody in town teaches music anymore.
Because I wonder if there was any town for its size anywhere that had more people that could play piano than this town had at one time.
But just think of the many pupils you have taught, and that has gone out into the world and done well with their music.
Yes.
Roberta Baker and Shell, you know, and Catherine.
No telling how many hundred students she had.
Many she had.
Do you remember, Jerry, that
My English.
Junior Music Club here rated second in the state of Missouri, Federated Club?
Is that right? I didn't remember that.
Buffalo, Missouri beat them.
Well, when I left here for school went away to college where all the kids from the bigger high schools went, I never felt that I missed anything living in Hornersville.
Miss Shula taught English in high school, but she also taught like a music appreciation, harmony, and all those things. And instrumental music, she taught horn and string music and
Violin.
a lot of one thing Miss Shula didn't teach.
An English teacher. I don't think
She taught organ, she taught piano.
And
was a
had
good
private
English
pupils
teacher.
too.
Yeah.
She's
Shula
kept that
left
off.
her.
Oh, it's kept off. Well, I think we're going to draw this to a close. Is there anything anybody would like to say? And there's no way we could close this because there must have been at least 10 things we didn't talk about this afternoon.
I think it's been the rest of the afternoon.
Talking.
We might even get into something more serious.
I want to close this by reading a poem, and my notes are all messed up here. I don't know what happened. One thing I wanted to say was that Woodrow Wilson once said that a nation which does not remember what it was yesterday does not know what it is today, nor what it's trying to do. We are trying to do a futile thing if we do not know where we came from or what we are about. And I think that's what we've been trying to do here this afternoon. What we see in our past is not always real. Inside of all of us, there is another them, one that we don't see, but it's there just the same. Atticus Finch told his daughter Scout in Harper Lee's masterpiece, To Kill a Mockingbird, you've got to get into someone's shoes and walk around in them before you can clearly understand them. And I think Hornersville has gotten into my shoes and walked around more than anyone since I grew up. In Hornersville, they taught us to play, and they taught us to work. And especially, they taught us to pay attention to the world. And I think that what I learned here is what has made me what I am today. Mark Twain said that a man who carries a cat home to the tail has learned 60 or 70 times as much as one who hasn't. It's knowledge that one has that will stay with you forever and will never leave you. So if you've lived in Hornersville, then I think perhaps you have carried a cat home by the tail. This is our second discussion of the historical events of Hornersville. The first one we held on June the 15th, and this is July the 7th, 1990. We have with us several guests today, and I'm going to begin at that side of the room introducing them to you. First, we have Lucille Branham Rogers, and she was with us in the first discussion. We have Pearl Smith Williams, second, who was in the first discussion as well. Ruby Burleson, Mary Hare, who's with us today for the first time. Liz Buck, who is with us today for the first time. Louise Perkins Brown, who was with us before. I'm Jean Mabry Young. B.F. Ford, Benjamin Franklin Ford, who is more famous than he'll ever know, because for 28 years I've been a teacher, and in almost every test I've ever given, I've put his name down as one of the multiple choice answers on the test. So he's become very famous and has been said that he wrote the Magna Carta and the Declaration of Independence. So we'll be expecting great things from Benjamin Franklin Ford. Edwin Glass Cope, who is with us for the first time today, and Pauline Mizell Alkus, who is with us for the first time today. I told you earlier that we were going to be just discussing anything that we can think of that deals with Hornersville or the past. And Lucille, you and I were talking one day about an election bet that always took place. Can you tell us about that?
It would always end in almost a celebration, because everybody went downtown to see Dr. Kinsella or Mr. Charlie Langton put the other one in a wheelbarrow and roll him from the depot to the river bank. Whichever one side lost, he had to haul the other, and it was a big deal.
Do you remember which one was the Republican, which one was the Democrat?
Yes, sir. Dr. Kinsella was a Republican, and Mr. Charlie Langton was a Democrat.
And was that only presidential elections, or was that?
No, it just any election that was important to them, but mostly presidential elections, I'm sure.
Any of you remember any other interesting elections in Hornersville? Didn't Clyde Tennant once? What was that?
Clyde Tennant and his opponent from over in the bottoms tied, and they flipped coins to see who got it. Clyde won.
That was pretty. Phyllis Hamrick told me she didn't vote that day because she said her vote never made any difference. She said if she'd voted, it would have made a difference because Clyde would have won, but she didn't vote. So, well, what about? We were talking before we started filming today about scouts. My father was a scout, and my father was born in 1909, and scouts weren't even organized until 1910. So Hornersville had scout troops pretty early.
Well, I
Scouts when I was youth. Doc Royce, we called him Doc Royce, worked for Highfield Mercantile Company, was our leader. We didn't pass our everybody Barrett test, but we had a group that met anyway. The biggest thing I think of we did was to pull up saplings and plant them. Some of them was planted on the schoolyard here. We pulled up from the ditch banks.
It's not a considerably different organization than
Yes, I'm sure it was. And at least we didn't have learned leaders then.
yeah.
Well, we had Granny Scouts, Girl Scouts, when I think I was about 4th or 5th grade.
Is that right?
And Miss Burlow Cope was our leader in that.
I think that was Campfire Girls, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was.
Campfire.
Campfire girls. And anyway, I learned how to make tomato soup without it curdling.
Dr. Lawrence was the first scout leader, I believe. Did he ever mention that?
We never mind Dad up in Northampton, took you all up there that day.
That's
You
right.
threw away all the food going up there. You turn around and come back the next day.
That's right.
And one of the boys that had to use the restroom, and just got it back on the back of the truck and used the restroom.
I believe
The
that's
woman was out sweeping. She just threw her hands up and threw the broom up. She thought the world come dead. He was going down the road using the restroom.
They didn't invite us back next year either.
Well, we're just throwing food away for
Throwing it at each other. Yeah,
And a food basket.
yeah, throwing lard and things like that. The basic food we had.
Bernie Hatcher and Art Young were our scout masters back in the old days. Used to meet over in the basement. Well, the basement here. And one night a bunch of boys pumped an old cat up to it. And that broke up the scout meeting. And we never had more scouts after that. 4 or 5 years, I think, before they reorganized.
They have Boy Scouts. So some of you were Scout leaders later on.
Well, I was when Erlang was little, when we reorganized scouts in this town when they were small. Mary Livingston was the leader of that, and we had scouts a long time.
You were. Okay, well, let's talk some more about school. What school teachers do you remember as being interesting? I've heard Mother talk today all day about Mr. Chapman that taught school here. Must have been very interesting character.
Everybody in
I've heard
school
of
knows
him.
about Mr.
Oh, yeah.
Chapman that went to school at the old schoolhouse. He was a rough customer.
Was he a good teacher?
Other teachers, when they, they'd send the pupils into him, and that kept them all on their toes because they were scared to go to Mr. Chapman. Because they'd send them, the other teachers would send somebody into them. You'd have to go in there and stay in there the rest of that period in his room if you did something that they didn't like. That was punishment enough when you had to be sent to Mr. Chapman's room. Besides, when you got a hold of someone to whip them. I've seen him, I thought he was going to kill boys. He'd twist the switches and whip them. And sometimes he'd make them pull off their shirt. He was rough. He got by with that.
The boys were rough then too.
Yeah, boys was rough too, I remember about that. But as mean as he was, they would do everything. They would put tacks in his chair and do everything. And they'd take the things out of the room and hide them, the ones in the big room. And then, of course, you were scared to say anything, you wouldn't want, if you knew about it, you didn't want to tell it. Then they'd hide them out around the logs and things in the schoolyard. There'd be these logs in the schoolyard at that time, this old schoolhouse. And they would hide the bell and they'd hide everything out there. And they'd do everything to him. You'd think as mean as he was, it was good to do.
Some of those boys then were pretty old too. Maybe old
Our
teachers.
Smith was going to kill him, He hid down the railroad
But he
with
got
a
killed
gun.
instead.
And he was going to kill him.
What kept him from doing it?
Huh?
What kept him from killing him?
Well, some of them found out about it and, you know, got the word around, and as they went down there, he was down on the railroad with a gun. He was going to kill him. No, I don't blame some of them. And they make it up, you know, sometimes, but they never did pull one off that they made up. They had ball bats and everything to fight with, and they was going to team up on him, but something or other kept them from doing that, you know. But he was rough.
Well, Liz, you know, the other day, Selma mentioned that one teacher had, 72 pupils at one time. Of course, it's one-room schoolhouse, and he had all the grades. But sometimes teachers think they're crowded nowadays. Well, and I wonder what that many kids learned.
Well, we had 3 rooms out
Did you
there.
have 3?
Yeah. We had 3 rooms.
Well, he was telling me about some little...
Yeah, well, see, this was built on. The first Hornersville school, it just had the one big room, and then they built on, you know, built on it. It was built just like all the other schoolhouses, just long, you know, and then they built this out this way. And then back the other way later, they had more teachers, added more teachers to it, but they had 3 teachers at that time when we went,
Was that the school out there?
out there where Barbara's beauty shop.
Was that the first
That was the schoolhouse. First schoolhouse I don't know anything about. Or they up by, the nearest I ever heard of was, Mom and them talked about was up around Coldwater, where Coldwater is, or somewhere up in there. And,
I think there was a school up close to where Ruby lives.
Yeah,
and,
there was a school.
the children, some of them, in our family, some of the Edmondson family, they walked from down in the Shields community through the woods to school, and through a path in the woods. And it was miles and miles of that, you know. And that's where they went to school. But what little school my mother went to school was just in a house that someone that didn't live in, just a little 2-room house. Big room and then a side room. And then in the side room they had a shelf up on the wall, and a water bucket and dipper was on that shelf. And our teacher would bring the baby to school and put it on a pallet. And she said she didn't want to stop and play with the baby. And the teacher would say, no, go on to your seat now, go on to your seat. And I don't remember her saying what the seats were, but I imagine blocks of wood with a plank on them. I imagine that's what it was. And see, most schools at that time was what they call subscription schools. Sign up for so many children, you know, and then when they got enough signed up, the teachers thought she could teach while they just started school, or he or whoever's teaching school. It's kind of like they used to have singing schools around. After we had schoolhouses, you know, they'd have singing schools, and you'd sign up, you know, for so many nights. Well, the school was run to some kind of the same way, just kind of like that. When they get enough pupils to start the school, they started.
I don't think I ever made a passing grade in Portland, except in Tom Wilson. And I told him several years before he died that he was one of the best teachers I ever had. And that's how much that meant to me. I respected him, but I scared him as a rattlesnake. I thought he was a fine teacher.
When it started out with a chart, you know, you had a chart, you learned your ABCs. And then they had what's called a primer. And then the first reader, which they don't have anything like that now, but I mean, that's the way.
Did you use a slate?
Have the chart, you learned your ABCs off that chart. That's all you had, just your chart, when you first started. And
Slates come in.
and then,
Did
then
you use
had
a
this
slate to
primer.
write on, though, when you were learning to write? Did you use a slate or did you use paper?
It had, you know, it had letters up on this chart, and the teacher would sometimes put them on the board. Well, that's the way it was when I went to
What
school.
did you write on?
Huh?
What did you write on?
Well, we had slates. Some of them had slates, you know, and that's what what you started out with. You have slates, and you erase it, you know, and write on them. Of course, if I had penny pencils, and when you started buying pencils and paper, just penny pencils.
Well, I don't know what happened. Somebody must have gotten hold of the kids around here because Lucille was my teacher and we were wonderful, weren't we?
But you didn't have anything to start when you started out on, just a chart to teach with. I mean, the first ones you taught, we didn't have any books. You didn't have a book, and then you had next you had what was called a primer. And then the first reader. And you know, the books didn't look anything like they do now. My language book had 3 little kittens on it. It was red and had 3 little kittens on the back of it. And my spelling book was yellow back. You know, my first spelling.
Now, you have a memory. I can't even remember what the color of the book is that I teach out of right now.
I've got my spelling book, but I don't have my language book. I left it in my trunk upstairs out there when we moved, and something went with it.
Well, there have been a good deal, a great number of teachers in this town over the many years that there was a school. There was a high school for 43 years, from 1961 to 1921 to 1964 were the years that the high school existed, but there were a number of students who went away to high school before that. And since that time, of course, they've gone to see it. What about doctors? Edwin, your family's been in the medical business for many, many years. What about some of the doctors that were in Hornersville?
Well, my father came here, Dr. A.D. Cook came here in 1912, and there were 8 doctors here at Hornersville. I asked him one time, he came right through Kennett to get down here, and I said, why didn't you stop at Kennett? He said, well, they had about 15 doctors up there and only had 8 in Hornersville, so I thought we'd settle down here. We were very plentiful back then. Of course, they didn't charge you very much either. There's been several doctors here. Dr. Bond was here. He came from Compliment down here. Dr. Odell, before Odell, there's Dr. Kelly. Kelly is what I'm trying to think about. Yeah, I didn't know the one under Kelly, but Dr. Linville was here, and Dr. Bond, of course, my father. And my father died in 1947. And after that, I got Wayne Stanfield here, and he was here for a little over a year. I think he's in Newport now. Then we had Dr. Bradburn in the office. And after that, we didn't have a doctor, and I got Dr. T.T. Odell. And I was checking up on him before he came to check with Dr. Tarver up at Kennett. It makes me think Dr. Tarver and Dr. Koplovitz were here too, back over the years. But anyway, Dr. Tarver said, got to refer this man, Odell, where he graduated from school, and when he graduated, he said, well, my goodness, he must be 80 years old. And I think he was. He lived while he was here, where Bill Moore lives now. And one morning I heard him knocking on the door, and I got up to see who it was. It was Dr. Odell, and he was lost. He couldn't find his home. He said, how do I get to my home? And I said, well, it's just a block and a half around here. And I had to go direct him to his own home. So he's one of the few people that was ever lost in Hornersville. And he was. I don't know whatever happened to Dr. Odell after he left. Why? The next doctor we had was Dr. Polinsky, came here in 1954. And he retired, I think, in 88. He's still here, of course. But Dr. Smith came in 88. He's here presently.
That was the Dr. McDaniel.
Oh, yes, Dr. McDaniel, I forgot him. He was here before Polinsky, yeah. He was here after Dr. Odell, I guess. He was here for not too long to stay. He went from here back over to Steele, I think.
You missed old Doc Mason, too.
Yeah, well, I don't remember when he practiced here.
Yes.
He was down at Upper Penn store there.
With my mother when I was born in 1909. That should be a mom's doctor. Dr. Mason was.
Now, there was no hospital in Dutton County until the Presnell Hospital. Was that the first
Presnell
one?
Hospital was the first one, yes.
And when was that?
That was before 54. It must have been late 40s.
No, well, early 40s.
Not that early 40s.
Early 40s.
That's after the World War, I think, wasn't it?
My great-great-grandfather was a doctor here, Dr. Harvey.
Is that right?
Patrick, one of the earlier doctors.
Well, in
W.M. Harvey.
In 1840, the census says there was a Dr. Grinstead here, so Hornersville had a doctor right
He
from the
was,
very
I
beginning.
don't think he was the first one, but he was one of among the first. But he's my great-great-grandfather, W.M. Harvey.
Okay,
He's the one that, he was a merchant here and different things.
there were several drugstores here too at one time.
Red,
Yeah, they
used to
started
go
out
to
first.
county's Red Dad.
With TV consulting, he had a combination. Drugstore, barber shop, and I don't know what else he sold, but it was down on the river, down south of where the present store is. And he moved, they built the building where the drugstore is right now, around 1900. Now, I get my information from John Dunbar. He was a pharmacist there then. Anyway, TV had the drugstore there, the Rexall drugstore, 1900 or thereabouts. And there's never been anything in that building but a drugstore since then, and still is. I know my folks came, my father came here in 1912, as I mentioned, and he got an interest in the store. And eventually, my uncle, old Jacob, got a half interest in the store. And on about in the 1920s, I think. And he was there until about 43. He and TV Consulting had a dispute. So they sold the store and TV bought it. And my uncle went down the street and put in the store. Until 1943, TV had died, and Miss Ella Consulting, his wife, was running the store. Old Jacob bought the store from Ella Consulting, and we moved them both together in 1943, shortly before I went to the Navy. He's been a drugstore in that building, and still is, ever since, ever since 1900, I guess.
Well, that's undoubtedly one of the oldest businesses, because I think that Pat Burleson was telling us the last time we were together that the store started moving up on what's called Mound Street about 1900.
I think Bert Langdon was trying to develop that, and he gave TV a lot to get him to move up there. That's the reason he moved up there and built the building. Well, I think he had a frame building there first that burned, and then they built a brick building that they're presently in.
I think at one time, though, we had 4 drugstores.
Oh, yes, we had 4 drugstores
at
at one time.
At the same time.
And I remember several grocery stores at one time, but I wonder what the most grocery stores were ever here at one time. And the department store, and what else? What other kind of stores have we been here?
Yeah.
We had 6 big grocery stores at one time, I know.
That's when this Ford Mercantile Company had a general store. At that time, G.R. Kelly had a dry goods store and clothing.
Oh, it's a Brockton in here.
Yeah, Brockton was in here with a clothing store too. I think
Used to be a bakery here.
The bakery?
There used to be a bakery here.
G.R. Kenley had a store.
I don't
And they
remember.
would deliver out in the country. And watch for that hack too, and ring that little bell.
I'm wondering about who was the first undertaker. We talked about doctors and druggers.
I have and I can't think what the name's on it, but I have a receipt for a funeral expense in 1870, signed by, and I can't remember the name of the people, but there was a funeral parlor here in 1870 when Marcus Williford died. They got a bill for the whole funeral, the casket, the whole thing, the bill was $10. So it was a pretty good deal, I guess.
Pretty high.
It might have been high, yeah.
Might have ripped somebody off.
Yeah.
No, they didn't.
And, well, you were telling me that there used to be a newspaper in Hornersville for a short time, too.
Mr. Mann ran a newspaper here. And some of you may remember his son, John Rathman. He did stay here for 2 or 3 years in his newspaper. He was the father of Gertrude Davidson and
He used to be a
other
good
sisters. The woman that worked for the Democrat wrote news for years.
Hazel.
Hazel Hobbs. That was their baby.
I asked you
you one time what you thought was the height of Hornersville, when it was at its peak. Because I think that Hornersville was probably headed in one direction, and the rest of the world headed off in another direction. And through the lumber and the river business, which both kind of played out. But what do you think was the height of Hornersville's?
Well, I think it's kind of hard to say, but it seemed to be like it was on the level for several years when the cotton production was at its greatest without the machinery. That'd be my opinion. And that's when most stores were here still. And the automobile was real popular and just come in.
And you told me there was an automobile dealership.
Oh, yeah, more than one.
Yes.
More than one?
Yeah, they used to have a Star agency here. We don't have the Star cars anymore. That was, Combs Horner had that, I believe. What's his brother-in-law's name? Remember, and then FC Parts had a Chevrolet agency here. Jimmy Hines had a Ford agency once.
And Jeff Branham had to, what was the,
Ford. First one.
no, I'm talking about Jeff now.
Oh,
He had Oldsmobile, I don't know, what was it?
Jeff didn't have an agency.
Yeah, he had cars right down there, him and Sally Mae. That new automobile,
Who with?
him and Sally Mae Langdon. Him and Jeff.
We're not going
What,
to
like-
remember that.
Oh, Saturday. We said, well, Saturday used to be done.
Yeah.
Jerry, I can remember the first automobile I ever rode in.
That's the Willie Smith building.
Mr. W. Cates that had the store had a car, and my dad worked for him. And I guess Linda and I must have been about, 5 and 6 or 4 and 5 years old. One Sunday afternoon, Mr. Cates took us out to Mr. Burl Robinson's. They had, Yule and Ernest were twins. They were about our age. We went out to visit them on Sunday afternoon, and I can remember us standing on the front porch waiting to see the car coming that we were going to ride in.
Lucille's mother had the first millinery store here. It's in the old hotel building, wasn't it?
You want me to tell it?
And we didn't,
Tell that story. Tell that story.
She's a little prejudiced. I think I ought to get to tell that. Because I was out. My mother and father bought the old Dr. Kelly home when we first moved to town. And the living room downstairs was so large. And Mother was a seamstress. And she had a gift for a decorating table. And she thought it'd be nice to put in a millinery store, which she did. Well, she'd order her hats. And some of them she decorated, and some came already decorated. So she saw what she liked for me to have, but she ordered 2 or 3 for small children. Mrs. Smith and Pearl were the first customers, I think, after they came in that time. And Mrs. Smith or Pearl was matched on to the hat that I wore. Pearl. I remember that. And she said, I'm sorry, but that's a hat I promised Lucy. Well, Pearl cried. She cried. Sunday morning, I wore my hat to Sunday school. She still cried. So I spoiled her. Her youth right there.
Right.
And that was before Wilma was born, and Miss Smith had planned to name her Wilma Smith, Wilma Lucille. And Pearl said, oh, Mama, please don't name her Lucille.
something like that.
Well, you tell us what that hat looked like. Do you remember what it looked like?
No, but I couldn't remember, but I know I really wanted that hat so badly. Lucille got it. But we've been very close friends after we made up.
With reservations.
Yeah. Well, we have to try to duplicate that hat.
I have no idea what it looked like. Do you remember?
I think it was blue with lace and big flowers.
Well, that would be my taste, wouldn't it?
Well, let's talk some about characters who have lived in and around Hornersville. And one of the things that, one of the interesting stories that Pauline reiterated to me not long ago, and I'd heard the story from her mother before a long time ago, was about your mother's uncle or?
No, my great-grandfather.
Great-grandfather. Yeah, why don't you tell us that?
Well, my great-grandfather was the village smithy in Hornersville, and he had 7 children. And in this article that I found from the Dumpling files, he was supposed to have had the first board house in Hornersville, and it was one of the finest homes. And he must have done a lot of other things other than being village smithy, because he accumulated land and gave each of his 7 children 80 acres of cleared land, which is pretty good, I would say. And then later on, my grandmother married my grandfather Burns, and then my grandfather bought all those heirs, and he accumulated all that. But anyway, back to my great-grandfather. I'll just have to read this to you because it's quite an interesting story. And the headline read, "An old citizen dead." The story began, Uncle John Turner, an old resident of Dumpling County, died January the 2nd, 1899, after a sickness of a few days' duration. In 1895, he announced to his friends that on a certain Sunday in May, he wanted all to come to his place and hear his funeral sermon preached. Elder Bohannon, who had was raised close by, had promised to do this very unusual thing for a live, healthy man. A large crowd did assemble under the shady tree in Uncle John's yard, and Elder Bohannon preached the sermon. The subject of the sermon was the most interested listener. He heard all of his good traits extolled and his irregular habits hinted at. The occasion was rather a sad one than otherwise. Those who expected it to be a mirthful affair were disappointed, and Uncle John looked more serious that day than he had before. He explained to this writer, who had also heard the sermon, that he did not believe that funeral sermons after death did anyone any good. He wanted what was said for or against him to be said before he died, and it was. And I've heard my mother tell that many, many times, that he had his funeral preached before he passed away.
It sounds like a good idea. You can get anybody to come, though. You might be disappointed with the church.
Right. And then there was an article when my grandmother passed away, and she was 89 years old. You know, that was a long life then, wasn't it? Because we just don't find people living that long back in those days. And she was married, born in 1835, and was married in 1855. And in this article about her, it says that Mr. Turner built the first board house in the city of Hornersville. And that was, I thought, an interesting thing, too.
Now, I wonder where that was.
I don't know. I'd like to know.
I
have no idea.
Remember him? You were born.
I don't know whether Mother would have known or not. But I do know that his land was all around Nesbitt in that area. And there are 2 farms that are still in the family. The one I have and the one that Emily Smith Hale has. And she has the original one that where my grandfather had lived before he came to Hornersville.
And those are the 100-year farms about the very best of the state of Missouri. Really, how long have you had that farm in your family?
I don't know. There's no telling how long. It's way over 100 years.
Well, that's very interesting. How about some of the other characters? You mentioned somebody a few minutes ago. I forgot who it was.
Tommy Roar, one. He was a town vet. He did the janitor work in the bank, both banks here, in my father's office, and the drugstore. And people kidded with him all the time. Of course, he couldn't hear or couldn't speak. Only he could grunt, that's all he could do. And Yaver Shan was another one here. Jeff O'Shan's another one here. We've had, look right now, I think we're their old characters now.
Yeah, I remember most of those people. What about, you were telling about Jeff O and his wife, Pearl. What about the interesting thing about their wedding?
They married here one evening, and I think the name of Hornersville went, but it turned out they were to be married. And of course, another thing, he was noted for his piano playing. And then they lived right across the street from where I live now. And his mother would get out when she wanted him to come home. She'd get out and yell for him. And here he'd come running down the street, and I don't know how he did it. He could pop his heels the loudest when he hit the sidewalk. It was just real funny. But she knew he was on his way home, and he knew he'd better get home.
He had a very unusual talent for playing the piano.
Oh, yes, he did.
And undoubtedly didn't read know the music.
No, he played in the ear. I remember they had a little pump organ there in their home, and on Saturday we boys would pump that thing for him while he played it.
He was a little bitty guy.
Talking about old Yates, funny story I have on old Yates, the time Baldy Wright shot him. And they had a trial down in the city hall. I laid out of school that afternoon to go to the trial. Baldy pledged it on the case. He said Yates was all humped over, and he said he thought he was a coot when he shot at him. From then on, everybody called Yates Coot. Oh, he'd get mad. But I think Baldy come clear on it. Best I remember.
Well, you know, Yates was a humpback, and I heard Mama tell the stories so much about he was hurt at school. And somebody was supposed to hit him over the back with a dinner bucket on the way home. Some of those rough and tumbly boys you were talking about coming home from the little school were supposed to hit him across the back with a dinner bucket that caused him to be hump shouldered. And from then on, he was, you know,
Didn't talk.
no, he never did talk like.
Several people in town talked him into running for some office. I don't remember what office it was. He went around lecturing, and he got someone, and he said, well, I'll tell you later. He said, I don't think I'll vote for you, but he said, I'll give you my influence. He said, I don't believe it. He said, now, you don't want your influence. If you vote, I won't.
Interesting story about Yaver. He used to go with my father on calls out in the country, and when Dad would go in and see the person, well, Yaver just wait in the car for him. He chewed tobacco all the time. And one time he went to sleep and his mouth opened up, couldn't there, and Dad, before he woke him up, he just sprinkled some quinine on that. And then he got in the car and woke him up, and he started chewing that tobacco and spit. And you can imagine what he said, the way he talked. Something wrong with that tobacco.
On that chewing tobacco, I remember two boys, Marshall Brown and Carl Miller. One day, my Uncle Arch, Young, you know, was study hall keeper for many, many years. Everybody was scared to death of him. These boys both took a chew of tobacco and Arch saw them. And so he just picked up all of his books and all of his papers and moved over to the table with them. And he said, boys, I believe I'll sit with you today. And by the end of the study hall hour, that was the greatest two boys I saw from that. Well, you know, the Langdons have been an interesting family. Someone mentioned Sally Mae a while ago, who was certainly a very interesting person, and Blanche, who was a missionary to China, and Winston. A lot of what, I guess, about that family we never really knew. Did any of you know any stories that Winston told about his?
I guess my mother's family, the Harkeys, have been here ever since it's been a Hornersville. They've spent some of them here. They came from Georgia. Yeah. But our Edmondsons, who came from Kentucky, once was here. My grandmother was an Edmondson. But my mother's family has been here almost ever since it's been a Hornersville. That's great. My great-granddad is first name up here in the post office. He was first postmaster. W.M. Harvey, that's my great-granddad.
And now, when was the first post office? Do you know?
Where was it?
When was the first office?
Who was the first one? He was the first postmaster.
He's the first one that's listed up here.
What's his name?
Harkey. W.M. Harkey.
I believe that's what's over. Mom made that.
That's the first one's listed up here. And
do you know what year it was?
1875.
1875. Well, that was
Till 78, wasn't it? Till I got it down here, but I got it's the date, but anyway, it's the first one listed up here.
He was the first one I made that start from research out of the Department of the Post Office.
That's the first one that's listed up here. That's Mom's granddad.
when you were during the time that you all worked in the post office. Are there records kept about how many people the post office services? How many people live in an area? Could you see a great decline in the number of people that were being served by that post office?
Yes, I'm sure. But actually, there were more boxes served in the post office. Used to, they just thought I would. Most of them just called for the mail. Not after we were in, but before that.
I wonder about the RFD. Are there more roll boxes now than there ever were?
What do you think? Could you see a great decline in that while you were on the?
Oh, yes. Yeah, it almost make you cry. You get out there and drive down some of those roads now. You see 8 or 10 homes, maybe not see one for a mile or two.
How's it going to?
Yeah, that's fun. Everybody's no home. You get a trailer now and then, very unusual to build a country home anymore.
Yeah.
Benjamin Franklin Ford was the second rural carrier that they had in Hornersville. And then Peggy started in 1909.
From 1909 to?
With a buggy and a mule.
From 1909 to when?
Until 55, wasn't it? 1954.
And you from 54 to?
81.
81.
3 mail carriers.
Right. In the whole district. Well, I read somewhere that in 1940, Duncan County had 80,000 people. And in 1980, it had 40,000 people. Although the population of Hornersville probably hasn't changed a great deal.
It's gone down.
The population of the town itself has gone down?
Yes.
Is it, what was it the most?
Like 1,000, I think, or close to
Over
it.
1,000.
Just a few over 1,000. Now it's 704.
Well, now it's been 700 or 800 for the last 20 years.
Yeah, it's been a long time.
Yeah, it's kind of holding its own now.
But it's likely to, it's likely not. It's likely not to, because how many of you have children who have stayed here?
Nothing for them to stay for. No jobs.
It's too many houses, great big old houses, one person in them now. Two.
Well, let me ask you about another character that I heard. I read this somewhere, it surprised the heck out of me. Did any of you ever hear of Charles Lindbergh spending time in Hornersville?
I've heard of him spending time on the cotton plant.
Well, yeah.
Come up there, it's one of his backers. Probably used to be up there, yeah, Bill Thompson. But I never did see him, Charles Lindbergh. The only Charles Lindbergh I ever knew was a black boy who lived over towards Reeves over here. He used to come in my store. Charles Lindbergh was his name, yeah.
Well, we had Harry Truman who lived in Hornersville. You remember Harry Truman?
That's right.
Harry Truman Daniels, I bet was his name. I remember about Lucille and Harry Truman. What do you think about Harry Truman and Lucille?
You remember about me?
I remember somebody said that during the election that you were the only person in Hornersville that thought Harry Truman was going to win.
We had a large group of people that they offered and played cards. And this election night, it was a doctor Zuplex. And of course the discussion mainly was the election. And somebody said, let's just take a straw vote here and see who everybody's for. Well, Jumbo Harkey was Democratic chairman at that time. I think I was the only one that thought that Harry Truman would win, even at Jumbo. And I accused Jumbo of turning against his party that time. And Bob and I stayed until later. They made us stay until the election was over, they thought. And every time the votes would be coming in, it'd be Democratic. And we just was to go, we could go for Democratic. Doc would say, no, stay just a little longer. He said, that's not right. Now, this is, and Doc would say, this is just a pre-libertarian day. You can't count on this. Well, we stayed till 11:30. We stayed till 11:45. We stayed till 12. And when Wisconsin came in Democratic, Doc's office says they felt crazy. So we laughed, and when we left, I know it was after 1. I said, well, Doc, you can wake me up if Truman loses the election. And I'll just be glad to be woke up. And of course, he was elected.
What about the first TV set you ever saw? Do you remember the first TV set you ever saw?
First one I saw was in the hardware store up here. Yeah, people look at it, and then the first one in a resident was Hubert Burns.
First one I saw Burns.
Yeah, they had a big magnifying glass in front of the screen so you could see it.
And there wasn't a lot to see, was there?
No, had a surprise. I mean, some wrestling was one thing we saw, I know.
They invited people to come and they had somebody invited to see.
Kurt Benton put one down in this
That's
store.
right. We bought the one at the hardware, I think.
That way it is?
Yeah.
They used to go in there at Kurt's at night and watch TV.
The first one that we ever saw, Lou and I were home for vacation, and we went by to Edmondson's Hardware, and we just couldn't pull him away.
They drew a big crowd every Saturday night watching TV.
What about some of the, do you remember any particular weddings or funerals or parties or fairs or anything like that?
I remember a wedding over at the Baptist Church and Major Ray got married.
Yeah, I did too.
Quite a wedding. Best I remember, they had it on the outside.
Yeah.
His second wife, I don't.
That was his
That's his second wife, yes.
Yeah, because he married his first wife in 1891.
Yeah.
I think none of you could remember that.
I missed that one.
Major Ray's first wife? She's my first Sunday school teacher. Yeah, Miss Jenny.
Yeah.
I remember about the old time funerals, the ringing church bell.
Well, I forgot, I'm
Sit there
looking
and
at y'all
count
know
them
how old I
there.
am. Saying things like that.
They would ring the church bell for a funeral.
Reach age.
One rang for every year of age.
You take 70, it'd ring a long time.
Slowly.
Sit there and count.
But that was at the Baptist church, as far as she was teaching Sunday school class. When we started Sunday school at the Baptist. And, of course, you know me, I didn't start school as early as some, you know, and I couldn't read. So she'd give me a book to read, and I couldn't read it. She jerked it out of my hand. So I wouldn't go back anymore. And they knew they couldn't make me, you know, I wouldn't go back anymore. I'll do everything before I go back. So that's when we started the Methodist Sunday School. Because Miss Jenny Ray jerked the book out of my hand.
Well, originally the Rays were Methodist. And he helped build he gave a good deal of money to build the parsonage, not this one, but 2 back, I think, before that. And then they left here and went to the Baptist. And I asked Miss Carrie Goff one time, I said, why did the Rays leave the Methodist church and go to the Baptist? She said, well, I think Mrs. Ray got a crush on the Baptist preacher.
I was thinking if they went to the Baptist first and then went to the Methodist. I didn't know, but I know she was at the Baptist when she was my Sunday school teacher. Because Dad wanted us to go to the Baptist church. And of course, Mom didn't say anything. She wanted us to go to Methodist, but she didn't say anything. And so we started. But we didn't go. I wouldn't go anymore. So that's when I started going to the Methodist.
Well, Major taught class for girls. Many years, I don't know. And he would give a watch for the one that went a year without missing. And I got a watch one time. Something happened to that. I wished I still had it, though. Just as a souvenir.
Somebody called and asking questions just not too long ago about the rocking chair that was sitting over at the Baptist church one tomorrow. Anybody around here had any idea where it was?
Well, they didn't say it was a rocking chair, did they? What didn't?
Don't take a rocking chair.
But I remember doing an ordinary
Just exactly how she looked. When she was teaching Sunday school class, I remember just how she looked. I was real young, but I remember how she looked.
Jerry talking about the bell tolling. I remember during the flu epidemic in 1918, when so many people died, and our house was on the way to the cemetery, and that bell tolled real often, and we saw the hearse go by real often.
I couldn't understand hear this bell toll. Is the schoolhouse. I never was. I was always, it just killed me. They were told this bell here at this church every time.
There was, who remembers, there were a couple of men killed at this church one night. I don't know when. Was it in the 30s or earlier than that? It must have been earlier than that. Do you remember that?
Oh, the ones about the lights.
I guess that's what it was.
Yeah, that's about the lights. They had the carbine lights. And that's how come they got killed.
They struck the back. See, you thought it was going on.
That's how they got killed. We were living where McCabe's live now, and they live on the next corner, not middle ways, the next street. And of course, everyone went to see what had happened after they heard the explosion. And we stayed on, I don't know why we stayed on, or anyone else knew it. But anyhow, they took down 2 doors and stretched them out on the doors, and then they just spread a sheet on them. And they didn't have any screens at the windows, and it kept someone busy standing by these 2 bodies, keeping the cats scooped off from them. I never will forget that. Those cats were just swarming in there.
I think one of those fellows was janitor over at the school, and the school kids all knew him real well. We had to pass by there next day going to school. And when they had the funeral, they turned the school out, and we all went to the cemetery.
Yeah, he was janitor.
It was a bad time for us.
And a tragic kind of death.
Yes.
Always be a few drownings in the river. But I guess not as many as you would expect for as many people as were around that river. And I remember a few, but
it may not have been so dangerous before they dug the ditches.
I don't know, was it with the river? The river was very shallow, was it not?
Yeah, it was a beautiful shallow river. I can remember being involved with my granddad. And
Shallow where?
Ferry Bend.
Shallow where?
The whole river.
The whole river?
Well, I know there were boats. It depended on the time of the year.
Must have been an unusual year because everybody had boats. Large ships at home.
Well, steamboats came down the river right up to
You didn't have to go very far to get to the real deep water because it was far to the lake. About 11 miles to the lake.
Now, what was the place they called Swiftwater? I never even heard of that until just recently.
It was down the straight line.
Why did they call it that? Do you know?
Well, the water was deep, I guess, and ran swiftly.
It's probably. Was that before the ditches were done?
Yeah.
Must be.
Yeah, I'm sure it is.
the floodwaters in 37, and I know a lot of you remember them.
Tell me the story about your father and the chickens.
Oh, well, he just put the chickens inside the house. They shut the kitchen, the one room off, and put the chickens in it to save them when they come out of the water down below town. They were on the, way down by the state line, all the rivers and ditches and everything was up. But he just caught all the chickens and put them in the house, keep them for
That 37.
and they left home. He said,
Then I thought it froze. The chickens froze to the floor, wasn't that?
well, yeah, I guess it did, that's right. They got in the water in the floor and it froze after that.
Next day when they came back, the chickens were all standing there, frozen to the floor.
I'd forgotten that part of it. But anyway, the main thing was Lucille and some of them worked in this
rescue efforts here. They had this church full of people. And
That's 27.
was it 27? Yeah.
Well, when we had a flood in 27.
We had one 37, 57 too.
I think 37 Lord, you're right. That's when they were here in the church. That's when a child born here in this church then. They were mine. That's delivered.
They live
Twins,
twins,
yes, twins.
Because you made it, I know she helped with that.
Well, his was getting her nursing career or just finished it. I mean, work, graduate. And she was helping a great deal here at this church. And one woman had twins, and somebody tell her. So they decided to name them. She wouldn't, everybody named them. Her name was St. Francis, Little River.
Is that right? Well, I wonder how many people there are in this town, or have been in this town, who are named Bond in some way or another.
Named what?
Bond. For Dr. Bond.
I had an uncle who was named after Dr. Bond.
Name for Dr.
Was there Bond Writings, Bond Rouse, and
Bond Price.
Bond Price? There was Bond Mabry.
Von Ruffin, too.
And Bond Writings, Dewey Writings' daughter was named after him. What about the Depression? How did the Depression affect Hornersville?
It really, it's really affecting. I guess 2/3 of the people were helped by the Red Cross. I know I was teaching out on the island, and every child in my room would bring big grapefruit, play ball with them. They didn't like, they had been used to grapefruit. They bring a grapefruit to school and play ball with them. They had been given to them by the Red Cross. And
Do you remember what your salary was?
yes, about $80 a month.
$80.
That's more than I got. I just got 75.
Well, you should have gone across the ditch.
You got 75.
Well, don't feel bad, I got 60.
Well, I didn't come into the consolidation till
I
after
think
Earl.
the people who work for a salary probably suffered more than people who lived on a farm, who had our own chickens and cows and pigs and a garden and orchard. And I know we had a lot of chickens and had far more eggs than we could use, and you could take them to the store and trade them for the groceries like sugar and coffee that we could come by.
The sad part of it is,
Yeah, but my mom would tell Dad to take the eggs off and trade them for something, get us something else. He'd say, well, when I go and they ask me what I wanted, I'd say eggs. I'd rather have the eggs as anything. So I could get him to take them and trade them some groceries.
What you started to say is,
the sad part of it, I think the destiny of Hornersville would have been very different if the leading people in town had permitted the sawmill and that industry to come in. Nobody would permit them to have the land, and rice sticks company that went to Bible wanted to come here. So that just choked the progress of her.
To Blythe.
Instead of the Bible movement.
I guess that's a bad thing. Although it certainly would have made it different in this town.
Yes.
We would, and I'm not sure we would have wanted it too different. One time I remember we were getting ready to go to Philmont Scout Ranch in 1957. We took the Boy Scouts to Philmont Scout Ranch. We earned the money. Bob Rogers and James Sharon took, and I don't know how many boys there were. We could count them. There was a picture that I had. But there were, what, 15 or 17?
12.
12. In the back of the truck that the Edmonston Gin, or Langdon Gin, I don't remember, Langdon Gin loaned us that truck, and we went to Philmont. we were out there when there were still wild animals and marauding Indians, I think. Bob commented he thought it was worse than the Army at the time, and I thought it was worse than the Army, so I decided not to go to the Army. But I was getting a pair of shoes to hike in on that, for that trip. And went over to Zenith and to Brooks' shoe store. Mrs. Brooks said, I don't know what it is about Hornersville, but they always do more for their kids, and they do more for each other. It seems that there's a different kind of spirit in Hornersville than there is in Zenith, than there is in other places. What do you suppose it was that made that spirit? Or was it? Was it really something that existed?
Well, I think in a way, Hornersville has always seemed like just one big family. I mean, when someone's in trouble or someone has a death in the family, I think we all feel it as if they were related to us. And I think it's the closeness that we share that has made Hornersville one of the things that I'm glad that I live here. I had a choice after I lost my husband of living here or where we had previously lived. And certainly, when in doubt in my mind, I wanted Hornersville for my rest of my days.
You're talking about back in the 30s, didn't anybody have anything I don't get, and everybody had to work. Uncle Bud Russ, I remember his wife going to the cotton patch, he couldn't pick with 100 pounds. She's out there every day, 100 pounds of cotton. Probably didn't make but $1, because $1 go a long way. Didn't need anything but a little kerosene. Raised what we eat, everybody I think had plenty to eat. Didn't have any welfare at that time, you know, we just everybody for themselves. I don't know if anybody starved to death. Maybe there's some people went hungry, I don't know. We didn't get what we wanted to eat sometimes, but we always had plenty to eat. And I thought we was having it rough, but we did get paid for our work, and Bud Buck talked to him here a few years before he passed away. He said, you know, I always envied you poor boys. I thought you all really had it fine. And I thought I just suffered as much as anybody. But he was working, I guess, and not getting paid for his work. But he just thought we had it nice. But you always look at somebody else and think they've got it better than you have. But I think we're all about in the same boat. It's rough.
Tell us something about the ball program which started, because you've been recognized by the state for your work, and even named the field after you, if I'm not mistaken. And I don't want to embarrass you, but tell us something about the ball program in Hornersville. When did you start that?
I don't know whether people are trying to get me to retire or expire. I've been honored and re-honored more than anything I've ever seen. I've been well blessed. I think Pat Burleson only had him 1 year, I believe. He started back in about 53, I think. I believe me and Bud Buck had him in 54. 55, and then I've had it pretty well ever since. But right now, it's going about as strong as it ever had it. We've got the girls interested now. Of course, they're playing with Zenith, but I mean, it's a community deal. Of course, Farmers Merchant Club, First Lions Club sponsored me, and then when they went out, they made them promise the Farmers Merchant Club would. That's one thing, we've never had to worry about money. If you ever need anything done, I've never asked for anything, I never did get. I've run through 20 or 25 assistants, I guess. They play as long as their boys playing, and they move up, which I don't blame them for that. They want to follow their kid. I think it's been worthwhile.
Well, I think this little old town actually cared about anything that's come up that was a, you know, it was a good thing. They kept on caring. Like I know your daddy and a bunch of them was playing ball out there and decided they needed the lights because it's cooler to play at night. It wasn't daytime, so they had the money made up just a day or two to get all those lights put up out there for the night.
And we were talking not long ago about the junior music club that we had here.
I think that was in 57, the junior music club. I won second place in the state. They rated second place in the state. Buffalo was first. And they were very active and enjoyed it. And the reason they enjoyed it so much, I don't mean to flatter the kids, but a lot of them had talent. Jerry and Ernest, most of them, Joe Hemingway, and Charlotte girls.
Linda Perkins.
Yes, Linda. And I know one program they put on, it was outstanding in my mind. It was a program on Indian music. And they did it all by themselves. They constructed an Indian village in out in the music room. And I just wish more people could have seen it. It was really, really good. And of course they used Indian music throughout it. And they used as authentic costumes as they could find or make. They did that in every program. They take some subject, some different kind of music, or take some star, some celebrity, and tell about their life. And I don't remember was it you that said when you went to college, or was it Joe that said music club opened more doors to him than anything he'd studied in high school?
I don't know, it sounds like a good thing I said.
I think you did.
People used to say, well, living in a little town like Hornersville, you miss a lot of things. I don't think we ever missed anything. We had to make our own. We couldn't go to the symphony, so we just listened and made our own symphonies. There's been lots of good music in Hornersville over the years, has there not? Remember, who've been the organist at the Baptist church over the years? For many, many years she was.
Ruth Christian was for a number of years.
Catherine Shell.
How many years did you play the piano? No, pretty bad. Don't talk about that.
And in this church, just about two women have played the organ, most of the time that I can remember. Hattie Mae Seabaugh and Rivera. I don't know who before that.
When I had it forward, I had it, but
Henry.
he played it started a lot too, didn't he? Here.
Mary Tennis been faithful for many years.
One of the first ones we had was Dr. Consolving, I understand, the organist.
Yes, I remember told me that. And then he had a brother whose name was Lim Consolving, that she said they called Professor Consolving, that played the piano at the church. She also said she didn't think they had a piano at that first church where the Methodist and the Baptist shared it.
Lily Kennett, or Lily Brandon Kennett, played the first organ. Mom said they had here at church. Because she had one at home, and you played the pump organ, or whatever they call it. They had to push the pedals to get the music.
Do any of you ever remember hearing of a circus that wintered in Hornersville?
Oh, yeah.
You have to take care of it.
Marlowe shows. Marlowe. Had a bunch of animals up there, kept them about half starved. Didn't feed them much through the winter. Had them up in the old Red Roll building.
Well, that's interesting. I wonder why they chose to winter in Hornersville.
Cheap, I guess. He sure didn't feed them much.
Hiding from the health department, probably.
You know that they give the World War II credit for changing a lot of things all over the whole country. Can you think of any changes that were made in your lives in Hornersville because of the war?
I don't believe we'd ever come out of the Depression that met World War II. It wasn't any better than 38, 39, or 40, either one.
I got a 30-month vacation because of the war. That wouldn't have got before. And all the way to Okinawa.
It took a lot of people out of town that, and of course, probably began the exodus of people leaving.
You're talking about boom time. To me, that was boom time in Hornersville, when everybody come back from 45 to about 55 till they began the mechanized farming. All these people in the hills come down and pick cotton. You couldn't get in these stores at night. You have to get out on the streets, get up and down. Midnight round will be lined up for 2 blocks, wanting to get in the show.
Cotton went up to 80 cents.
You couldn't even walk down the streets on Saturday evening. You couldn't. It's just, just as thick as they could be.
You couldn't hardly walk down the street.
But unless it rained, the only business we had was Saturday and Sunday. All week, we'd get ready for the weekend.
But Saturday was a big day.
Oh, yeah.
Because everybody come town on Saturday.
Going back to the war days, ration stamps, remember them? I've looked through some things other than that, found some ration stamps I had left over. I can imagine I had any left in the bin.
We had a bandstand. I barely can remember that bandstand uptown. What did they build that for? For a band, I guess?
Band for a local city band, yes. I was in the band.
I was too. While Richmond came over from
Yes,
Central,
that's
we had
right.
band practice.
Used to enjoy those concerts.
We have a concert every Thursday night, I think, and they had one on Friday night. We play here and then go over there and play with them.
We played at the fair, at Kenny.
The only thing I ever remember it used for was the Saturday afternoon drawing.
Yeah, well, but it was constructed for a band.
W's merchant that time at the drawing. How much did y'all put in each week, you remember?
I believe it was $2.
$2 a week. Well, I know it built up. Patrick was born in 1948. And Pat never came to town on Saturday afternoon. I usually came down and brought the kids to the show, and he never came to town, so I Kenneth at the hospital that Saturday, and he brought him to town. The drawing had built up to $125, I believe it was, and he got it that day. And went up and paid the hospital. I paid my 10-day hospital bill with that $125 he won. And there's all $1 bills.
Now there were, how many, 2 banks I remember here in Hornersville.
2 bands. Merchant Blanders and Bank of Hornersville. That was the one that Lane did on Bank of Hornersville. And when they quit, they just paid everybody off and quit. I don't remember
Just gave the money back.
Yeah.
But didn't they quit on account of the government regulations?
I think so.
That was what it was. Didn't want to mess with the government.
On the calendar.
Government regulations, when the government started regulating them.
Wonder why they took their money off Kenneth then.
I don't know.
Was there ever a bank robbery?
Yes, it was one here, but they didn't get anything. That's when Joe Rose was working there in the bank. And this fellow came in with a pistol on him. And FC Sergeant went back in the vault to get his pistol and came back out and hollered, "Duck, Joe," when he shot right over his head at the man, ran him off, but they never did catch him.
Uncle Munn was in on that.
Yeah, Uncle Munn was sitting there in that desk that used to be over the front door, and Doc Cook was with him. And Doc raised his hand, and Uncle Munn said, "Put your hands down, Doc."
What about any robberies of stores or things like that? Do you ever?
All I know of is break-ins at night, but not an armed robbery, not daytime.
It was a fairly safe place after it once got over the original, the Merrill gang and so forth that Mary Smith Davis tells about in her history and that we've heard about that made Hornersville such a wild, rough place. There was a period for about 10 years from the Civil War days to the 1870s where there wasn't a church or meeting hall or a safe place for anybody to live in Hornersville.
I understand the renegades stayed here, wondered here.
It was worse than the circus.
That's right.
Made it a very bad place to live.
This was a haven for them.
Do you suppose there's still people in Hornersville who don't lock their doors?
I know some, yes.
Well, we don't want to tell who it is. We don't want the news to get out that thieves are probably going to buy this tape like crazy. And they'll all use it.
You had robbery down at your house a few years
That's right.
ago.
I didn't lock mine. I caught somebody in the house. I lock it down.
But all in all, it's
Just for the record, in case someone buys that tape, I lock my house tonight.
and all the people here lock their houses.
Well, when I left here and went to Columbia, Pat came back one time on a trip and left my old house unlocked. The front door was unlocked, and we didn't come back for over 3 months. And nobody's been in yet that we can tell. So everybody took care of the place while I was gone.
You told me something one time, now this is unfair because we haven't even discussed this,
that took place between two women, or the shooting that was going to take place a long time ago between two women on Main Street? Do you remember that? Undoubtedly, I've gotten that wrong.
I thought you was going to have me tell about my great uncle. We shot the man for spitting tobacco in his face.
We'll talk about that.
Spitting whiskey in his face. That's all there was to it.
He shot him?
He shot him. Did he kill him? No. I worried for a long time till I found out whether he killed him or not. But he didn't, they said. But he sent word to the sheriff to come down, and he told him what he did. And he said, now what do you want to do with me? He said, I'm here, I'm willing to do what you say. He says, just get that bull south. And my dad always teased my mother and said, now that's how come all the random was in the south.
We all shot you. Well, there haven't been too many. I mean, no, with the other situation.
Oh yeah, it's when John Old shot Larry Smith at the post office one day. Must have been mad at him, I'm sure. I was a small boy then. I remember going in with my dad. He called the doctor over there. Going in and saw the excitement in the back of Quinn's drugstore. That's where the post office was. And he had reached for a gun to get John Wood. He made his threats on him. John was the law here. And he didn't give him a chance. He shot him down right there. I think he fell on the hot stove they had going. Dead right away.
John Scarborough killing across the ditch.
Oh, yeah, that's across the ditch.
Somebody asked old Otis Pierce, he was out there, Otis way about 250. He said, well, was you running coming back to town? He said, no, I wasn't running, but I passed none that was.
Well, Dr. Whiskey got initiated on a killing, you know,
Yeah,
right after he
that's
came.
across 81 ditch.
Yeah, he had to go across the ditch over to,
Just across the ditch,
Yeah,
there's a little house across 81.
what's their names? I can't even think.
Booker, yeah.
Bookers. And,
His son-in-law killed him.
yeah,
He
yeah,
was-
son-in-law hit him over the knee.
Big stone went hit him in the head. He's the one that came after him. Dr. Polinsky was the one that killed him. He rode the boat with him over there, and he told him there's something wrong with him. I don't know what's wrong with him. He got over there, Dr. Polinsky found out that he'd been killed. He said, what's that, what's that? But he didn't come back with the boy.
I started
Make somebody else work.
He came back with somebody else. And then Dr. Polinsky came to the drugstore. That was just one of the experiences he'd had here in Hornersville. He had quite a few experiences here. He'd just been here just a little while now.
Of course, in more modern history, I guess one of the most interesting days was the day the extortion attempt on the bank.
Yeah.
When was that? About 68, 69?
Something over then, I think. That's when David Jackson was in there.
Yeah. I know I drove up there in front of the bank, and I turned to Aubrey Dillon, who was standing there. I said, Aubrey, what's going on? He said, well, somebody called David Jackson about 10 o'clock and told him that that they had a bomb set to go off. If he didn't bring $10,000 in unmarked bills to the first fence post past the bridge on the Silverdale Road by a certain time. And I thought, well, if Aubrey Dillon knows this, then I guess everybody knows it.
Pretty well.
And that afternoon, the road was hot. Silverdale, everybody going out to check to see if anybody got that money. Noni came out of the bank about that time, and I said, Noni, where are you going? She said, I've got to go home and clean up my house because the bomb squad's on its way over here, and I don't want them to see it the way it was.
But there wasn't a bomb.
But there was somebody really trying to manage that out of the pen. I don't remember his name now, but they knew his name.
Well, not long after that, a banker up at Neelyville or Naylor or somewhere up in there, he and his family were killed.
Yeah.
And it's about the same story, almost exactly the same story. So there may have been some truth in it. But I would say you couldn't scare people in Hornersville; they were unscarable.
They scared David Jackson, all right, for quite a while. He was scared.
Yeah. But I guess that was the second attempt at bank robbery. I read once in the Dublin Democrat about an explosion that somebody blew the safe open at the post office
in Hornersville, and that was many, many years ago before any of your time, I'm sure. And it was Mr. Walter Wicker, not Walter Wicker, Walter Parrott. Was he the marshal in Hornersville at one time?
He was justice peace for years and years.
Well, maybe that was what, but anybody said that he was the only person with a gun that would go up and find out what happened. That there was a crowd there, but nobody would go near it because they all wanted to, they were afraid. And he was the only person with a gun that would go and check out the explosion. Well, there was some excitement at your drugstore one day. I remember when Ruby Weisner parallel parked.
Yeah, she came into the store with her car. And almost got my daughter, but she just moved away from there. And Ruby had a can of de-icer or something that got caught between the accelerator and the brake. When she put the brake on, the can got over on the accelerator, and she was backing up. She just backed right in the front door there. I'm not going to tell you what she said, but she was out there. She was very caustic about it.
Well, Pearl, you were telling about that big fire over at, burned up that block there where Hattie, she made them live that time, you know, when you the other day. What big, oh, well, okay, talking about somebody else then, but there was a fire that burned up that block of house.
No, I didn't.
Well, did that start from an explosion or just one of the houses catch a fire, or?
I don't know.
You don't remember that?
It must have been
Probably when you were gone.
I believe it started over the corner down there. John Sandell was good in that. And they couldn't stop it. Everybody turned out, but they couldn't stop the fire. They just began emptying the houses and cabled up to the corner where the next street where his shoemate's house was. Burned that house, but something's supposed to say that.
We didn't talk, last time we didn't talk much about Dr. Consolidate, and everybody always had a story about Dr. Consolidate. I've heard hundreds of them. Many of you got a story that you want to share. Yeah, about Dr. Consolidate.
Well, I ought to know real well. We lived on that farm when we was born. 3 of us was born on Dr. Consolidate's farm. Dad was farming down from Bardell.
Well, isn't he credited with having brought Johnson grass to this country?
That's right.
And then bringing the goose to Johnson grass up, wasn't it?
It was the other way around, wasn't it?
Oh, maybe so.
Or was it? Maybe I'm wrong. I understood that he brought the geese to eat. He cleaned the cotton, and the geese didn't have enough to eat, so he brought Johnson grass to feed them. You didn't? None of you heard that?
No.
I've been talking to a rough crowd, actually. Who's talking that story?
I heard he brought Johnson seed, broadcast.
Black Sudan.
Yeah, he's going to make a pasture out of it. He sold it to Johnson Grass. That's where he got started here.
Then he grew too well.
Dad used to, he said that Miss Consolidate, he said she had a lot of, pictures, painted pictures upstairs. She'd take him, when he'd come, to pay rent and all. Well, she took him up there and showed him all them pictures, she had there. He said a whole bunch, and of course everybody had large pictures then, but she had some real painted and real fancy pictures, he said she had a lot of pictures upstairs,
And somebody told me she had a car that was wrapped up with a bow on it that she never unwrapped.
She went to, the way I heard that story was they went to St. Louis on a shopping trip, and she saw that car displayed, wrapped up cellophane with a big red bow one morning. He sent one of the tape guys up there with the truck and brought that car home to her, just like it was wrapped up. And that was the car she had in the garage, sat there.
I don't recall that, but my sister was working in Memphis, and she boarded at a place where car salesmen boarded too, and where he worked, they sold Cadillacs. And one night he had to sit down for the night meal. He said, "Well, we really had an experience today." And of course they wanted to hear what it was, and he said, an old couple came in, sort of ragged, said the man had a rope around his waist, fell. I said, no one paid much attention to them. Just went on about their business. Finally, the old lady came up to one of them at the desk and said, we picked out a car we want. And they said, have you? She said, yes. And he said, well, show it to me if you will. And it was a Cadillac. And he said, he still didn't know how to make the transaction. He didn't know if they were all right or not. But he said, come in here to my office and we'll make out the papers for your payments and the interest and so on. And she says, what payments? And he said, well, you don't want to pay all cash. He said, we'll sell it to you on time. She said, oh, we've got cash. We paid cash for that Cadillac. This first Cadillac they'd ever sold for cash.
I have heard my grandmother talk about, she always carried this black bag with her, and it said it was always full of money.
And jewelry, I heard.
And jewelry. Carried with her.
That's the old story now. Who wound up with a black satchel? Been several stories. Nobody knows for sure, I don't think, who got the black satchel.
Well, then nobody knows for sure how much money they actually did find in that house anyway. But there have been all sorts of guesstimates as to what the money was. I read newspaper articles, but didn't they say that about $140,000 or something they found in that house?
I don't remember, I wasn't here.
They said there was a long table wherever they took the money to count it. It was high with bills.
My grandmother Young used to tell me that Mrs. Consolidate told her that she buried a bushel of gold here when she came to keep it safe. Grandma always swore nobody had ever found that gold yet. She knew it's here in Hornersville somewhere.
He told Dad, he said something about it, his shoes was worn out or something. He said, no, said you can always wear them one day more. Always wear them. Not Consolidate. Wear it. When you thought this wore out, you could wear them one day more.
Well, I remember the long stake of cotton they raised out there. I tried picking it one time, I think. You had to pick it so clean, nobody wanted to pick it.
Oh, no, you didn't work hardly anything. Then he tried it planting it, not doing anything to it, just kind of
Let it grow up.
broadcast, tried that. He tried it. Then, he just put geese out there on the cotton, wasn't going to hold, just put the geese out there. Tried that. He just ran about it. But I think,
Trucking for higher wages one year, cotton chopping.
yeah.
He went up on the wages, but he wouldn't hire any of them back to the truck.
I think when he lived on this place, I think Mr. Crop was the overseer of George and Jake's dad.
Another thing I remember about him was my brother used to kill mice and rats all week and take the tails in and sell them to Dr. Consolidate on Saturday for a nickel apiece. And I never did know why, unless he just really rid in the country of that many rats and mice. But I know he took rats and mice tails to town every day, every Saturday to sell.
That sounds a little fishy,
Well, he can
do some crazy things,
And snakes, they catch snakes and take them into him. He ordered them around the place to keep down his rats and mice and things.
When Captain Shields was mayor, they had a rat program on. Of course, Ford and Heupel had the old mule barn around there. We had lots of rats, and I trapped them things. They'd given a nickel apiece for rat tail. You go in a cap pay off, and he'd tell you to go in there and throw them in the stove. I was tempted to put them in my pocket. But I'd throw them in the stove and get my nickel, and here I'd go. That's good money. You can make a dime, 15 cents in there every day. Getting rats. I got rid of my part of them.
Had a good little rat though, you could do that.
That answers the question.
Yeah, I guess they were just trying to rid the country of the rats and mice.
How late do you suppose in the history of Hornersville people were actually able to make a living on the river? Do you remember people who could still make a living on the river?
Well, we got one man in town right now still making a living from it. Raymond Springer making his fish nets. Or, not exactly nets, they're traps. And he uses some, ships some, sells some.
Didn't you hear somewhere, Leonard, he's the only one left that makes them?
Yeah.
You told me. Yeah. The only person left that makes those traps.
I said Raymond, then it is Wayne's Raymond. And then.
Yeah, it's the only person left. Everybody knows that.
Yeah, he's dead.
Raymond's not dead.
Yeah, well, it wasn't Raymond she was talking about. It's
I
Wayne
thought
she
about
was talking
Wayne, my
about.
next door neighbor, you know, that's how we did.
You talk about old town characters, you're gonna leave Senator Stone out.
Yeah.
Claude Stone wasn't a character, in my opinion. He was a craftsman.
Well, he was a pretty good character.
Well, he was a
Good
craftsman.
storyteller.
Well,
He's nothing like the senator.
he wasn't like the senator.
Well, and I don't remember, was he the father?
Yes.
He's the father. Yeah.
He's the one that jumped the ditch, he seen the snake and turned around and went there and went back to look back.
What?
He's midair and you see the snake on the other side, just turned around midair and jumped back.
Ain't you ever heard that story?
He also told a story about how a buggy and a horse, one day he had some puppies in the back end, and he's coming home, there's a big rainstorm, and hit him, and he drove that horse real fast, never got a drop of water on him, and the puppies drowned to death. He told it for a fact, too.
That's Mr. Stone. Yeah, I remember.
Somebody I remember was Polly Thomas.
Yeah.
Was he, did he fish and stay on the river? It was Frank Reynolds' wife's dad, Gertie's dad.
Ran a little store down there for years.
Gertie ran it.
He come out on the street one morning, he said, I forget what the man's name is. He said, you know who Bill so-and-so said he died last night?
We get a big kick out of some of those things that are written up in the minutes of the
Oh, yes, I did the history of this church. There were two people who had been de-churched from this building, from the Methodist Church in Hornersville. One of them was Dr. Gonsalves. And I asked my grandmother, who was the only person who could have been alive during all that, what happened. And she said she didn't remember it ever happening. It would have been when she was here, but she didn't remember it happening. Although she said she could guess what it was for.
So can we.
She said she felt sure it was when he left his wife. But another one was an uncle of hers, Bassett. Yeah. Now she said she didn't remember that, but do you remember that?
No, I just heard Mom and them talk about it.
You don't know what they kicked him out of the church for?
No, I don't know what it was for. Dally Bassett one.
Yeah. Well, he was the one that was kicked out of the church. And he was my grandmother's uncle. And she didn't remember. Maybe she didn't want to tell me. Whatever it was he did.
The ones that were turned out of the Baptist church had dances in their house and they drank.
Did they use the expression, we had that history from Holly Grove Baptist Church out in the country, where they kicked Mr. Bibbs. Mr. Allen Bibbs. Nearly every other weekend, they kicked him out for falling off the wagon.
Yeah.
And the next week they put him back.
Give him another chance.
Yeah. And he had 50 chances.
His daughter said they turned him out this little church out here in the corner for selling a dog.
For selling a dog. Or for selling a dog.
Bible says
You carry the price of the dog in your pocket.
I've never heard that.
I never heard that one. What does that play up in the Bible? Well, it didn't tell about it, did it?
Well,
I'm not gonna argue. He was at our house one day, and Miss Potter come down there. You know, she's Pentecost, from Pentecost Church. They got into the office argument, and Clarence was there. He said, he just got up and walked in the house, you know. And he said, they turned me out of that church out there, you know, because he sold it all. And Miss Potter, you know, and him got in. They got this talking this church, you know.
Well, Rufus Earhart had them all arrested one night. You remember Pentecost Church on the corner out there. Because they made too much noise, and Rufus had them all arrested.
Have you read it? It's in there. It's in the Bible. didn't have a pair of shoes when we saw kids.
Maybe he did.
We all felt sorry for that because he never had shoes on.
Oh, yeah.
He went barefoot in the cold weather.
I got caught up sitting one time in a snowstorm. Somebody carried me home. I was up there barefoot in the snow.
That's when you had your leather coat on.
Leather coat.
Somebody carried me
Leather
home.
coat and barefooted.
Well, it's been very interesting, and if any of you have any final comments, why, because these are going to have to be final comments because I'm not coming back down here. Although I have thoroughly enjoyed this, and I think we've learned a lot. And if you can imagine in 30 years somebody looking at this tape and saying, oh, I remember so-and-so. But very few people are going to be able to remember the stories that you people told today without something like this. And you know, these are not written down anywhere, and they will be forgotten. It's a shame that we have already lost hundreds and hundreds of things that would have been interesting, and perhaps more interesting. The older they got, maybe it would have been more interesting than what's happened today. We've missed a lot of the history of Hornersville in the last 30 years because it's too recent. We don't consider that so terribly important. But there's been a lot of good things happen and a lot of interesting things happen. I think perhaps the most important thing about any town is the friendships. You know, you mentioned that we all are like one family here. Mary Jo Boganis, told me that when she was in Spain, she said, you know what the people in Spain enjoy? She said, they like hearing stories about Hornersville. She said, I tell them stories about Hornersville. And the friendship. Somebody asked me one time, said, what is this Hornersville anyway? I said, it sounds like a big camp. Said, you run into people all the time from Hornersville. And I said, yes, I rarely ever go anywhere that I don't run into somebody from Hornersville, or somebody who could share some of those old experiences. Mary Jo Boganis wrote a poem that I want to end this with, that she sent me one time, and I think it fits very nicely in this situation. It seems wherever I go, people come into my life and go out of it, touching me where I can feel, and then leaving me only with a memory, like the gossamer fairy tales of children, easily forgotten, and I wasn't through knowing. How do I know who I am seeing for the last time? How do you halt your life together and keep those around you that you have known? When a voice will not lift my heart with joy any longer? And how do you keep fairy tales from losing their magic? So come and brush against the walls of my life and stay long enough for us to know each other and spend rich hours in friendship, even though we have to part sometime, and we do both know the more we hope to share our companionship when that friendship is gone. But come away anyway, for fairy tales are the happiest stories we read, and great books are written in little chapters.